My name's Tyler. I'm 27, and I guess if you asked my family, they'd say I'm the serious one. I don't drink much. I'm not really into loud parties, and honestly, I'm the guy who gets stuck organizing everything because he's so responsible. At least, that's what they tell me, until it's time to actually appreciate it. This Easter was supposed to be different. For once, I thought maybe I'd actually feel like I belonged instead of feeling like the hired help they forgot to pay. It started a few weeks back. My dad, Frank, called me up out of the blue. We're not super close. Haven't been since he remarried, but he sounded chipper, almost eager. Big Easter this year, he said. Everyone's coming. Thought you could help get things ready. At first, I was just happy he even thought to include me. Sad, I know, but that's how low the bar's been set over the years. He rattled off a list: tables, chairs, food, decorations, something for the kids, maybe an egg hunt. And I said, sure, no problem. I had some extra cash saved up, and deep down, I wanted to believe this was a real invitation, not just another favor wrapped in fake enthusiasm. So I got to work. I reserved tables and chairs from a rental company 2 towns over. I ordered catering, nothing too fancy, but definitely good enough to make people happy. I even bought dozens of plastic eggs, filled them with candy, and mapped out a little egg hunt across my dad's massive backyard. Every spare minute I had that week was spent planning. I even printed little place cards for the tables. I told myself it would be worth it, that maybe this time they'd see me as part of the family instead of just a background character. The morning of Easter, I woke up early and loaded my car with supplies. I drove the 45 minutes to my dad's place, getting there before anyone else. I spent the whole morning setting up, lugging tables into the backyard, arranging chairs, setting out centerpieces, double-checking the catering orders. By the time noon rolled around, I was sweaty, sore, and completely exhausted, but proud. It looked beautiful, like a real family event, not just some thrown-together potluck. Kids started arriving with their parents, darting around and laughing as they spotted the colorful eggs tucked away behind flower pots and beneath trees. For a moment, just a moment, I let myself believe I had done something good. Then came lunch. Everyone gathered around the tables, laughing and chatting. I sat down next to my half-sister, Emily. She's 16, quiet, way more aware of things than she lets on. As we passed around plates and shared stories, I noticed my dad standing up, tapping his glass for attention. Before we dig in, he said, raising his beer, I just want to say it's amazing to have everyone together. Real family, you know? Feels like old times. People cheered, clinking glasses. I smiled awkwardly, not sure whether he meant to include me or not. That's when it happened. He turned toward me, almost like he just remembered I was there, and laughed, loud enough for everyone to hear. And let's not forget Tyler, our extra. Try not to get in the way today, champ. His words landed like a punch to the gut. My stepmom, Sharon, gave this smug little smirk and sipped her drink without a word. A few people chuckled politely. Emily looked down at her plate. I didn't say a thing. I didn't cry or argue or storm out. I just stood up, quietly, calmly. I didn't even grab my plate. I walked through the yard, past the tables and decorations I had set up, past the egg hunt prizes and the coolers of drinks I had bought, all the way to my car parked in the driveway. As I sat there with the door open, keys in my hand, a slow burn started in my chest. Not the kind of white-hot anger that makes you do stupid things. No, this was cold, sharp, focused. I realized something in that moment. They didn't see me as family. They never did. To them, I was just useful. Until I wasn't. Until it was more convenient to humiliate me than to thank me. And that's when I made my decision. I pulled out my phone and opened up the rental contracts. Every table and chair out there? My name was on the agreement. The catering order? Paid for with my card. Even the egg hunt? I had the receipts. Every single thing they were enjoying depended on me, and if they thought I was just an extra, they were about to find out exactly how important that extra had been. I called the rental company first. Thankfully, I knew the owner personally. Small towns have their perks. I explained that the event hosts were being disrespectful and that I needed the equipment picked up immediately. He didn't even question it. Said he'd send a truck within the hour. Next, I called the catering company and asked them to stop delivering any more trays of food. Turns out, they hadn't even brought out the desserts yet: cakes, cookies, chocolate fountains, the big finish everyone was waiting for. I told them to cancel it. Refund wasn't possible at this point, but honestly, I didn't care. Let them figure it out. Finally, I walked around to the side of the house where I had hidden the grand prize for the egg hunt, a huge basket full of toys, candy, and gift cards for the kids. I grabbed it, tossed it into my car, and shut the door. I sat there for a second, engine running, watching the party in the backyard from a distance. Watching as the kids ran up to the prize table, finding it empty. Watching as Sharon's face pinched with confusion when the catering guy stopped coming back with more food. Watching as my dad started looking around, frowning, clearly sensing that something was very, very wrong. I could have stayed. I could have watched the whole thing unfold from the sidelines. But I didn't. I backed out of the driveway slowly, savoring the moment, and drove off without a word. No angry texts. No tearful confrontation. Just silence. Of course, that wasn't the end of it. Not even close. But that was the moment, the one where it all started to crumble, where everything they had relied on, everything they had taken for granted, began slipping right through their fingers. And I wasn't even there to see the chaos when it finally hit. The first call came about 15 minutes after I turned onto the highway. I let it ring. Then another, then another. My dad, Sharon, my step-uncle, even Emily, though her message was just a quiet, "Tyler, I think something's wrong. Please call me." I almost answered hers, but not yet. Not until the others learned a lesson they couldn't ignore or sweep under the rug like they always did. I pulled into the parking lot of a little diner just off the exit, the kind of place where the vinyl booths squeak when you sit down and the coffee tastes like it's been sitting on the burner a few hours too long. I ordered a burger and a Coke and sat by the window where I could scroll through the flood of messages lighting up my phone. Some were almost comical. Dad texted, "Tyler, where are you? The tables are gone. What is going on?" Sharon texted, "If this is your idea of a joke, it's not funny. Bring everything back now." Dad texted, "You're embarrassing yourself. Get back here and fix this." Dad again, "Grow up." It was almost funny, watching their messages slide from confusion to anger to veiled insults, and then, gradually, into panic. Sharon texted, "The kids are crying. There's no food left. The parents are getting mad." Dad texted, "The rental company showed up. They're taking everything. You need to get here before it's all gone." I scrolled lazily through them, sipping my Coke. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. They were doing a fantastic job digging their own grave without any help from me. For once in my life, I wasn't going to be the one patching things up after they ruined everything with their arrogance. Another call buzzed through, this one from my Aunt Karen. I rejected it and opened the group chat where they were all frantically coordinating. Karen texted, "Does anyone have extra chairs?" Uncle Rob texted, "The food's almost gone." Sharon said no dessert is coming. Sharon texted, "This is humiliating. People are leaving." Dad texted, "Where is Tyler?" I leaned back against the booth and smiled to myself. It was almost poetic. The perfect family Easter they had bragged about for weeks gone. Shattered by the very person they had written off as just an extra. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Emily, and unlike the others, it actually made me hesitate. "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. Please just let me know you're okay." A knot twisted in my chest. Emily wasn't like the rest of them. She never had been. She didn't laugh when Dad mocked me. She didn't smirk like Sharon. She had sat there, face flushed with embarrassment, unable to meet my eyes. And now she was reaching out, probably stuck there in the middle of the disaster, feeling as out of place as I always did. For a second, I thought about going back, just for her. But no, I couldn't. Not this time. If I went back now, I'd be undoing the one thing I had finally managed to do, stand up for myself. For once, I wasn't going to be their fallback plan. Instead, I typed out a short reply. "I'm okay. Don't worry about me." Then, after a second's thought, I added, "You're better than all of them, Em. Don't let them change that." I set my phone face down on the table and finished my meal at my own pace, ignoring the way it kept buzzing and vibrating every few seconds. I paid in cash, left a tip twice as big as the bill, and walked out into the warm afternoon air feeling lighter than I had in years. When I finally pulled into my driveway an hour later, the buzzing had finally stopped. I figured they had either given up or moved on to blaming each other for the chaos. Knowing my dad and Sharon, it was probably a spectacular screaming match with plenty of finger-pointing and zero accountability. I dropped my keys on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the couch. For the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like a failure. I just felt free. It was late that evening when the real fallout started hitting. I was flipping through channels, half watching a documentary about deep-sea fishing, when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a Facebook notification. Sharon had posted a furious status, tagging almost every family member we had. Some people are so selfish and petty they'd ruin a family holiday just for attention. If you know who you are, I'm done with you. The comments were a dumpster fire. Aunt Karen commented, "Oh my God, what happened?" Uncle Rob commented, "You're better off without toxic people, Sharon." Some cousin I barely knew. Family is supposed to be there for each other, not sabotage everything. For a moment, I considered replying. I even typed out a few drafts in my head. But in the end, I just turned my phone off and tossed it onto the coffee table. Let them twist themselves into knots trying to explain why the party they bragged about for months collapsed around their ears. They could rewrite the story all they wanted online. The people who were actually there? They knew. They saw the tables disappearing. They saw the food stop coming. They saw Sharon's fake smile crack and my dad storming around like an angry toddler. No Facebook rant could erase that. I thought that would be the end of it. That they'd just stay mad, maybe ice me out of family events like I cared, and eventually move on. I was wrong. Because the next day, the situation escalated into something none of us could have predicted. And when it did, it wasn't just my dad and Sharon facing the consequences, it was the entire family. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating violently against the coffee table. It wasn't the normal trickle of notifications either. This was constant, like a swarm of bees buzzing angrily just out of reach. Groggy, I sat up and grabbed it, expecting more petty Facebook drama. Maybe another rage post from Sharon. Maybe some pathetic guilt tripping from Dad. It wasn't just that. Missed calls, voicemails, texts, from people I hadn't heard from in years. Cousins, second cousins, even a couple of family friends I barely remembered from childhood barbecues. It was like the whole extended family tree had suddenly remembered my number overnight. Some of the messages were short and panicked. "Tyler, call me." While others were longer, angrier, full of accusations I didn't even understand yet. Confused, I opened one from my cousin Jake first. "Dude, what did you do?" "Grandpa's furious. He's pulling his donations. He's cutting Dad off. Sharon's losing her mind. Call me." "Grandpa?" I blinked at the screen. Grandpa Harold was my dad's dad, wealthy, old school, and the undisputed patriarch of the family. The man basically funded half of my aunts and uncles' lifestyles through a combination of guilt money and sheer stubbornness. And while he wasn't the warmest guy, he hated public embarrassment. To him, family gatherings were business, a chance to show off a united, perfect front to the world. And apparently, yesterday's disaster hadn't just ruined Easter. It had gotten back to him. Another message came in while I was reading Jake's, this time from Aunt Linda, Dad's sister, who never texted me unless she needed something. She texted, "You are so selfish. I hope you're happy. Grandpa says the whole summer house thing is off. Thanks for ruining everything." I stared at my phone, trying to piece it together. Summer house? A few months ago, there had been talk about Grandpa helping Dad and Sharon, along with a few of the other important family members, buy a beach house they could all use, meaning, of course, that I wouldn't have seen so much as a doormat unless they needed someone to clean up after them. Grandpa had apparently agreed, in principle, to front the money if they could show they were responsible enough to manage it. Responsible, public image, respectability. And then they threw a family Easter where half the guests left early, the food ran out, the kids cried, and the rental company showed up like repo men in the middle of the egg hunt. I scrolled down farther to a screenshot someone had sent me, an email chain between Grandpa Harold and my dad, copied to half the family. Grandpa Harold said, "Frank, after hearing about the absolute debacle that took place yesterday, I have decided to reconsider any financial support for future ventures. It is clear to me that there is a severe lack of leadership, planning, and basic respect within this family. Until such issues are addressed, I will be withdrawing offers of assistance, effective immediately." Ouch. Underneath it was my dad's frantic reply, groveling, making excuses, blaming unforeseen circumstances, even trying to subtly pin it on me by claiming I had abandoned my responsibilities. And Grandpa's brutal one-line response, "Leadership means solving problems, not blaming others." I let out a low whistle. For a man who usually wrote like he was dictating a 19th century business memo, that was basically a flamethrower. It all started making sense now. The desperation in the calls, the sheer panic flooding my inbox. They weren't upset because they missed the tables and chairs. They were upset because the money, the privilege, the image they worshipped, all crumbled because they couldn't resist taking one cheap shot at me in front of a crowd. The irony would have been delicious if it wasn't so pathetic. And speaking of pathetic, Dad finally cracked and sent me a direct message around noon. Tyler, we need to talk. I know things got out of hand yesterday, but you can't just disappear when family needs you. We can fix this. Grandpa just needs to see we're united. Let's meet. We'll explain everything. You'll apologize, and we can move on. I read it 3 times just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. I would apologize? The man who laughed at me, who humiliated me in front of everyone, who treated my hard work like it was less valuable than background noise. I needed to apologize? It was so absurd it almost made me laugh out loud. I didn't respond. Not to him, not to Sharon, not to any of them. Instead, I turned off my phone and went about my day. I took a walk, grabbed some ice cream from the corner shop, watched some stupid comedy show on Netflix. It was the most peaceful Easter Monday I'd had in years. But the story didn't end there. Because later that night, when I finally turned my phone back on, I found a voicemail from Emily. She sounded small, hesitant. Hey Tyler, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for what happened. I tried to stand up for you, but they wouldn't listen. Grandpa's really mad. Dad's blaming you for everything, but I know it's not your fault. I'm scared they're going to try something. Just be careful, okay? That last part stuck with me. Try something? At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she meant they'd just doubled down on the guilt tripping or the smear campaign. But something about her tone, tight, scared, like she knew something I didn't, kept gnawing at me. And it turned out, Emily was right to worry. Because the next move my dad and Sharon pulled, it wasn't just petty. It was war. And this time, they were about to learn that I wasn't the same extra they could shove around anymore. I didn't sleep much that night after hearing Emily's message. Her voice kept playing over and over in my head, the fear threading through every word. By morning, I decided, no more waiting. If my family was planning something, I needed to be ready. I spent the first part of the day getting my ducks in a row. I backed up every text, every voicemail, every receipt showing I had paid for the Easter event. I made copies of the rental contracts and catering orders. I even pulled bank statements showing the charges. If they wanted a war, I wasn't going to stumble into it blind. Around noon, I got my first clue about what they were up to. A letter slipped into my mailbox. No stamp. Hand-delivered. My stomach sank when I saw the sender scrawled across the top. Frank Patterson, my dad. I opened it right there on the porch. It wasn't handwritten. No, this was typed up like some kind of official notice. And it was absurd. It accused me of sabotaging a family event, causing reputational damage, and I almost laughed at this one. Theft of family property, referencing the egg hunt prizes I had removed from the backyard. They were threatening small claims court for a basket of candy and dollar store toys. I walked back inside, laughing under my breath. It was so desperate, so embarrassing, that I almost felt bad for them. Almost. But then I remembered Sharon's smirk. My dad's mocking laugh. The way no one, not one adult in that backyard, had said a single word in my defense. They hadn't treated me like family. They treated me like a tool, a joke. And now they wanted to drag me to court to save face? Fine. I could play that game. I spent the next 3 days preparing. I consulted a lawyer, not some high-priced shark, just a local guy I knew through a friend who specialized in petty lawsuits and nonsense like this. He laughed when I showed him the letter, called it the legal equivalent of a temper tantrum. He helped me draft a formal response, attached all my documentation, and informed them that if they pursued this, I'd be countersuing for reimbursement of expenses, defamation, and emotional distress. And because I'm a thorough guy when I'm angry, I also drafted a detailed letter to Grandpa Harold. No bitterness, no name calling, just a clear timeline of events, copies of receipts, proof that I paid for everything, and a calm explanation that I had removed property I legally owned after being publicly humiliated. 2 days later, the lawsuit threat quietly disappeared. No apology, of course. No acknowledgement. Just silence. They thought if they slithered away without fanfare, maybe I'd let it go. But the damage was already done. Grandpa Harold called me personally that Sunday. At first, I almost didn't answer. I stared at the screen until it nearly timed out. But curiosity got the better of me. Tyler, he said gruffly when I picked up. I received your letter. I waited. I want you to know, he continued, that you handled yourself with more dignity than the rest of them combined. I'm sorry you were put in that position. It wasn't warm. It wasn't effusive. Grandpa Harold didn't do emotional apologies. But coming from him, it was monumental. He cleared his throat. There will be some changes coming. I've reevaluated some of my plans. We didn't talk long. Grandpa wasn't one for long chats. But when I hung up, my hands were shaking. It wasn't just vindication. It was something deeper. I had spent so long chasing their approval, waiting for someone to see me, not as an extra, not as an afterthought, but as someone who mattered. And now? Now they would have no choice. The fallout was immediate and brutal. A few weeks later, I started hearing whispers through the family grapevine. Grandpa had rewritten parts of his will. Not dramatically, he was still leaving some things to his children, but with significant reductions. Large portions were now earmarked for charities, and a separate trust fund was being set up for the younger grandchildren, Emily included, completely bypassing Sharon, Dad, and their inner circle. The summer house project? Dead. Annual family vacations Grandpa used to fund? Canceled indefinitely. Worse for them. Anyway, Grandpa made it very clear that future financial support would be performance-based, meaning no more blank checks. If they wanted help, they would have to prove they could handle responsibility without embarrassing the family name. And guess who he appointed as the trustee to help oversee the grandchildren's fund? Me. Tyler, the extra. The news hit the family like a meteor. I didn't gloat. I didn't post passive-aggressive Facebook statuses or send smug texts. I just lived my life. Quietly. Peacefully. Finally free of the invisible leash they had kept me on for years. Emily texted me a few times after that. She was careful not to say too much, probably worried someone would check her phone, but her messages were kind. Grateful. She told me she was proud of me, that she wanted to be better than the environment she grew up in. I believed her. We started meeting up sometimes for coffee. Quiet chats about her plans for college, her dreams of getting away from the toxicity she had grown up in. I helped her set up a savings account, helped her research scholarships. Little things. Things nobody else in that family would ever bother with unless there was a photo op attached. As for the rest of them, I haven't heard a word from Sharon or my dad in months. Not a birthday card. Not a Christmas text. Not a single fake thinking of you post. It's like I vanished from their universe. Good. Let them sit in the wreckage they built with their own hands. Let them explain to anyone who asked why the family golden child wasn't around anymore. Let them stew in the knowledge that the person they treated like background noise was the one who finally turned off the music. Sometimes I drive past Dad's house on my way home from work. Not to snoop. Just because. The backyard still has tire tracks where the rental company tore up the grass, hauling away the tables and chairs. The garden's overgrown. The place looks sad. Empty. I don't smile when I see it, but I don't feel bad either. I gave them every chance, every opportunity to treat me like family. They made their choice, and I made mine. I'm not the extra anymore. I'm the one who walked away. And this time, I'm never going back. My name's Leo. I'm 22 now, but this story starts a little over a year ago on the day I graduated from university. It was supposed to be one of those days that you remember for the rest of your life, the kind that gets framed in photos and told at future family dinners. But when you grow up in a house where your existence feels more like background noise than something to celebrate, expectations have a way of shrinking. Still, I thought, maybe just this once, they'd show up for me. My younger brother, Marcus, had graduated high school the year before, and they went all out. They rented a banquet hall for the whole evening. They hired a photographer who followed him around like he was royalty. My dad gave this emotional speech about how proud he was of the man Marcus was becoming, and the night ended with my parents handing him this elegant box. Inside was a silver wristwatch with his full name engraved on the back. Everyone clapped like they were watching a royal coronation. When it came to my graduation, college, not high school, I got a text in the family group chat that morning. We'll be there. Don't worry. That should have been my first clue. They did show up, technically. My mom, Dad, my Uncle Brian, and my Aunt Cheryl. Marcus didn't come. He was tired from a late night. No flowers. No photos. Not even a balloon. They sat stiffly in the back, barely clapped when my name was called. And when I came over afterward, they all just stood there awkwardly like I was a stranger at my own ceremony. My dad handed me a card with a stock image of a graduation cap and said, "Here, from all of us. Congrats." Then he clapped me on the back and added, with that dry laugh he uses when he's being funny, "You're lucky we remembered." I didn't laugh. I didn't even smile. I just stared at him. That's when Uncle Brian, who's always been quick to call me sensitive, muttered, You've always been so ungrateful. It was the kind of moment where time doesn't freeze, but you feel like you do. Everyone else moved on. My mom started digging in her purse for something. My aunt was scrolling through her phone, and my dad had already turned away like the moment never happened. I looked down at the card in my hand. No one had even signed it. So I took my diploma, turned around, and walked straight to my car. I didn't say a word. I didn't look back. I drove until the university campus disappeared in my rearview mirror, and then I pulled over, turned off my phone, and just sat in silence. The kind that weighs on your chest like a lead blanket. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just went blank. You see, this wasn't some isolated oversight. This had been building for years. I was the oldest, but never the favorite. Marcus was the golden boy, star soccer player, naturally charismatic, always the one everyone bragged about. And I was the serious one, the quiet one, the one who stayed home and studied while Marcus got invited to parties. My achievements were always brushed off with a good job. Now what? While Marcus got framed certificates and surprise ice cream trips for getting a B- in geometry. I used to tell myself it didn't matter. That someday, if I just worked hard enough, got the right grades, landed the right job, they'd finally see me. That they'd finally be proud. But that day, sitting in my car with an unsigned card and a diploma no one had even asked to hold, I stopped believing in someday. That night, my phone buzzed endlessly when I finally turned it back on. Missed calls, voicemails, messages that ranged from, "Are you okay?" to "You're overreacting." I ignored all of them. Until around midnight, when I saw a message from Aunt Cheryl. "What did you say to them?" "Your mom's in tears and no one speaking." That made me pause. I hadn't said anything. I didn't reply. Not yet. The next day, I got up early and drove to the nearby park. There's this hilltop there where you can see the whole town, and I sat there with a thermos of coffee, just trying to decide what to do. I wasn't angry, at least, not in the shouting, slamming doors kind of way. I was tired. Tired of always being the second thought. Tired of pretending a pat on the back could substitute love. Tired of being told I should be grateful for scraps while Marcus got the whole buffet. The silence from my parents stretched for 3 days. Then, on the 4th, I got a call from Marcus. I didn't answer. He called again. Then again. Then a text. "Hey man, mom's freaking out. Can you just tell them where you are?" I didn't reply to him either. Instead, I started planning something. You see, they didn't know this yet, but I'd already been offered a job one I hadn't told them about. It was out of state. Decent salary, great growth potential, and most importantly, far away. But that wasn't all. I'd also been helping out behind the scenes with some finances, my parents' finances. They struggled more than they let on, and over the last couple of years, I'd quietly started picking up some of the slack. A few mortgage payments here, an overdue car insurance bill there. It wasn't a lot every time, but I kept the lights on more than once. They never said thank you. I never asked them to. It wasn't out of duty. It was habit. Guilt. Hope that maybe, they'd see. That hope died the day they told me I was lucky they remembered. I hadn't told them I stopped paying. So I waited. And waited. Until a week later, my mom called. Not to say sorry. Not to ask how I was. But to ask, "Leo, did something happen with the mortgage company? We got a notice. Are you sure you sent the last payment?" I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply. And then I typed, "You're lucky I remembered." Right? Then I turned the phone off again. What happened next? That's where things get interesting. The fallout didn't happen all at once. That would have been too easy. No, it started slow, like a leak in the ceiling you pretend isn't there until the whole roof caves in. When I turned my phone back on 2 days later, it was like someone had set off an alarm in the family group chat. My mom had sent a wall of messages, starting off polite and confused. "Hey honey, I think the payment didn't go through? Maybe a bank error." Then shifting into more frantic tones, "Leo, please call me. This is serious. They said they're sending another notice next week." And finally, the passive-aggressive guilt trip. "I can't believe you'd do this to your own parents. After everything we've done for you." I almost laughed at that last part. Everything they've done for me? Like what? A card from the clearance aisle and a pat on the back? A lifetime of being compared to Marcus like I was some knockoff version that never quite measured up? I didn't reply. The next message was from Marcus. "Dude, are you ghosting the whole family? Just call mom. She's losing it." Still, I stayed silent. And then, the real unraveling began. That weekend, I got a call from the mortgage lender. Technically, the account was still in my name since I'd helped them refinance during COVID. My parents had bad credit back then, and I had offered, naively, stupidly, to sign as a co-borrower. They couldn't have done it without me. And now that I had pulled my payments, they were getting the consequences they'd been shielded from for years. I didn't pick up the call from the lender either, but I did answer when my Aunt Cheryl rang again. She didn't yell. She didn't scold. She just asked, softly, "Leo, what happened?" I could have told her the truth. I could have said, I got tired of being invisible. I got tired of giving and getting nothing back. I got tired of being the safety net no one thanked. But instead, I said, "Ask them," and hung up. Later that night, I packed the rest of my apartment into 2 suitcases. I left the furniture. I'd sold what I could online, donated the rest. I threw out the last bag of groceries and dropped my key on the counter. The moving truck had already left earlier that morning with the few boxes I cared to keep. I told no one where I was going, not even my friends from college. I just left. My new job was in Seattle. Clean start, new coast, no history. I got settled fast. I was too used to being alone for loneliness to slow me down. Within a month, I had a new routine, a quiet apartment, and peace for the first time in years. No text about overdue bills. No guilt tripping. Just silence. But back home, they were spiraling. My mom started calling daily, then texting. When I didn't respond, she switched tactics. She emailed me. She reached out to one of my old professors. She even messaged a few of my friends on Instagram. Every message sounded more desperate than the last. My dad? He didn't say anything directly. But I heard from a neighbor, Mr. Flanders, the retired guy who lived 2 doors down from my parents and always used to wave when I mowed their lawn, that there were arguments almost every night now. Shouting. Slamming doors. My mom crying on the porch. The second mortgage payment missed. Then a third. Eventually, foreclosure notices showed up. I wasn't trying to destroy them. I hadn't planned for it to go this far. But I also wasn't going to be their human shield anymore. The last straw came in the form of a letter. It arrived in Seattle, 2 months after I'd moved. No return address, but the handwriting was my mom's. Inside, 2 pages. One was a photo of me at 6 years old, holding up a Lego spaceship with a toothy grin. The other was the note. "We don't know what we did wrong. If we were too hard on you, we didn't mean to be. We thought you were strong. Stronger than us. I'm sorry. Please come home. Or at least tell us where you are. Love, Mom." I sat with that letter for hours. Read it. Reread it. And for the first time in a while, I cried. Not because I forgave her, but because she finally noticed. For once, she saw the crack she helped make. And then, almost as if the universe was waiting for that moment, I got a call. From a number I didn't recognize. I picked up. It was Marcus. He didn't yell. He didn't whine. He just said, "Leo, Dad's in the hospital. He collapsed. Stress-related, the doctors think. Mom's barely holding it together. She won't eat. I know things got bad. I know you're hurt. But please, just talk to them. Please." I was silent. Then he added, quieter this time, "They're losing everything. And they think they've already lost you." And that's when I realized something. They weren't losing me. They'd already lost me a long time ago. They just never noticed until the safety net was gone. I looked out my window at the city skyline, at the space I had built without them, and whispered, mostly to myself. They only noticed when I left. Marcus was still waiting for my answer. I didn't answer right away. Marcus stayed on the line, silent on the other end, probably hoping I was just gathering my thoughts. But I wasn't. I was sitting there staring at my reflection in the window, this tired, older version of the kid they once forgot to clap for. I finally said, "He's in the hospital?" Marcus exhaled, like I'd just broken the ice on a frozen lake. "Yeah, high blood pressure, stress, maybe something with his heart. They're still running tests." He collapsed in the kitchen. Mom found him. I waited a few seconds. "Is he okay now?" "They're keeping him overnight. Mom's with him. She hasn't left his side." I could picture it. Her crying in the corner, wiping her face with a tissue pulled from the bottom of her purse, clutching the hospital bracelet like it was a rosary. And my dad, trying to play tough in a stiff hospital bed, probably still acting like this was all just a fluke. Like none of it was connected to years of denial, pressure, and depending on a son he never made space for. Marcus was still talking, his voice low now. "Look, I get that they messed up. Okay, I do. They messed up with you, Leo. I didn't even see it until you left. Everything just fell apart." I almost said something sarcastic, something biting, Like, yeah, life without a doormat is hard. But I didn't. Instead, I said, you saw it. You just didn't care. He was quiet. That one hit. Then he said, you're right. Just like that. No defense. No excuse. I should have spoken up more. I should have noticed. I guess I liked being the favorite. Didn't want to rock the boat. I'd waited a long time to hear that. Longer than I realized. But the problem was, it didn't fix anything. The scar was still there, stitched over too many years of quiet birthday disappointments, missed recognitions, and constant comparisons. I let the silence hang between us a little longer before asking, why are you really calling me, Marcus? He paused. I don't know. Maybe I thought, if anyone could calm them down, it'd be you. They're scared. Dad's scared. And Mom keeps saying your name like a prayer. She thinks if you'd just come back, things would start making sense again. That part almost made me laugh. Now I was their solution? I said, did she think saying my name would keep the lights on? Did she think remembering me now would pay off the mortgage? He didn't answer, so I kept going. You want to know why I left? Not just the graduation. Not just the years of being the backup singer in Marcus's solo act. I left because I finally saw the truth. They never saw me. Not as a person, just as a role. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one they could lean on and forget about. I was only valuable when I was useful. I could hear his breathing on the other end. He wasn't arguing anymore. He was listening. The day I graduated, I continued. I realized they hadn't forgotten to get me a gift. They hadn't forgotten to celebrate. They had remembered exactly what they thought of me. And that generic card? That slap on the back? That was the clearest thing they've ever said. Another long pause. Then Marcus, in a voice that barely sounded like him, whispered, so what now? And that was the question I'd been asking myself for weeks. What now? Do I come rushing back to be the emotional life raft for the parents who only noticed me when I stopped being their cushion? Do I let their panic reel me in like a fish they threw back years ago, now suddenly craving its taste again? Or do I let them sit in it? The weight of absence, the consequence of years spent praising the wrong son? So I said calmly, now? Now they learn what life looks like when the person they forgot becomes someone they can't reach. Marcus didn't fight me on it. Didn't beg. He just said, okay, I get it. Just, if you change your mind, let me know. And then he hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I sat in that moment like it was a warm bath. It was the first time I felt like I was choosing me. The next day, I called the mortgage lender. I asked them to officially remove my name from the account. It took some back and forth, but since the payments had been delinquent and I hadn't signed the renewal paperwork they'd sent a month ago, I was legally in the clear. Then I blocked every family member except Marcus. A week passed. Then another. I didn't get a single message, just quiet. Unsettling, eerie silence from the people who used to send guilt texts like clockwork. Until one evening, just as I was settling into bed, I got an email. Subject, from Mom. It wasn't long. Just a few lines. I understand now. We broke something, and I don't know if it's fixable. But if it ever is, just know we'll be waiting. No strings. No guilt. Just waiting. Love always. I didn't reply to the email. Not that night. Not the next day. I let it sit, like a letter found in the bottom of an old drawer, yellowed and fragile, too late to do what it was meant to do. But the thing about forgiveness, real forgiveness, is that it's not about saying it's okay. It's not about pretending the wound didn't happen or wrapping it in duct tape and calling it healed. It's about choosing not to carry the weight anymore, even if the scar stays. 2 months passed after Marcus's call. My job in Seattle kept me busy. I settled into a rhythm. Early mornings, strong coffee, and walks around the city after work where no one knew my name. And I didn't have to be anyone's responsible one. I was just Leo. Just me. I didn't think about going back. Not because I hated them, but because I was finally living a life that wasn't an apology. Then, one gray Saturday morning, I woke up to a voicemail. From Marcus. His voice was tight. Tired. Hey, Dad's home now. He's okay, but not the same. They lost the house. Foreclosed last week. They're staying with Aunt Cheryl in the basement. It's rough. I think they finally get it. I mean, I don't know if it fixes anything, but they're different. Quiet. Like, really quiet. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but they still talk about you. Every day. There was a pause. Then, I think you won, Leo. I think they finally saw you. I didn't know how to feel. I sat with those words, repeating them in my mind like a loop. I think you won. But revenge had never really been the goal. Recognition was. I wanted them to see me, not through the lens of what I could do for them, but for who I was, for what I carried, for the effort it took to always be the one who made life easier for everyone else while getting scraps in return. I didn't call Marcus back, but I thought about what he said. And 3 days later, I booked a flight. I didn't tell anyone. I just landed, rented a car, and drove straight to Aunt Cheryl's. It was raining. Of course it was. Her house was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just grown. Funny how that happens when you finally leave. I parked across the street and sat in the car for a long time, watching the lights inside flicker behind half-drawn blinds. I could see silhouettes, people moving, a shadow near the window, a plate being passed at the dinner table. Then I got out, crossed the street, and knocked. Aunt Cheryl answered. She blinked like she was seeing a ghost. Leo. Her voice cracked. I nodded. Is it okay if I come in? She opened the door without a word and stepped aside. The house smelled like pot roast and old carpet. Familiar. Tense. I walked in slowly, down the narrow hallway, into the kitchen where I could hear silverware clinking. And then I saw them. My mom was sitting at the table, her back to me. My dad was across from her, thinner than I remembered, shoulders slouched like a balloon half deflated. Marcus was next to him, looking up as I entered. My mom turned, and for a second, she didn't speak. No one did. She stood up so slowly, it was like she wasn't sure her legs would work. Then, quietly, Leo. I nodded once. Didn't smile. Didn't cry. Just said, Hi, Mom. She covered her mouth with her hands. My dad didn't move. His eyes were locked on mine, red-rimmed and full of something I hadn't seen in years. Not pride. Not anger. Grief. We didn't know if we'd ever see you again, my mom whispered. I know, I said. Marcus stood up. I'll give you guys a minute. He left the room, and Cheryl followed, closing the door gently behind her. It was just the three of us now. No one knew what to say. Finally, my dad cleared his throat. I don't even know where to start. Try the beginning, I said. He nodded. Okay. The beginning. He looked at his hands. We failed you, Leo. We really did. That made my mother sob. He kept going, voice trembling. We treated your reliability like permission to ignore you. We leaned on you, expected you to carry everything, and when you did, we acted like it was just your job. I didn't interrupt. I let him talk. Marcus was always louder, more in your face. You were quieter, steadier. We thought you didn't need anything from us. I said, everyone needs something. My mom finally stepped closer, wringing her hands. We can't undo what we did, but I want you to know we know now. We see it. We see you. And I don't care if you never forgive us. I just needed you to know we're sorry. There it was. Not a perfect fix. Not a magic rewind. Just truth. I nodded again, slowly. Then I said something I didn't expect to hear myself say. I forgive you. My mom burst into tears. My dad's head dropped into his hands. But, I added, forgiving isn't forgetting. Things won't go back to how they were. I'm not the son who pays the bills and takes the blame anymore. I'm not your second choice. I'm not your afterthought. I'm just me now. And if you want a relationship with me, it has to be real, equal, respectful. They both nodded, fervently, like they'd just been handed a lifeline. We talked for hours that night. Not about the mortgage or the graduation or even the years of neglect. Just about life. About who I'd become. About who they were finally learning to be. I didn't stay the night. I said goodbye, hugged my mom tightly, shook my dad's hand. Yes, shook it, and walked out into the rain. As I drove away, windshield wipers thumping gently, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Light. Free. Not because they had changed, but because I had. Because I had drawn the line. Walked away. Stood tall. And when I came back, it was on my terms. The prodigal son didn't return home broken. He came back rebuilt. And for the first time in my life, they finally saw that. The story ends here not with vengeance, but with vindication. Not with a collapse, but with clarity. And sometimes, that's the best kind of revenge. Not watching them fall apart, but watching them grow up. My name's Dylan. I'm 19 now, but this story really started the day I turned 18, the day of my high school graduation. You know, that day most families treat like a big milestone. Cameras flashing, tight hugs, awkwardly long speeches from people who think they're more inspirational than they really are. But in my house, it was just another Saturday. No balloons, no banner, not even a congrats, kid. Just the sound of my sister's voice echoing from the hallway as she called dibs on the car, so she could get to her spa weekend on time. Yeah, that kind of family. Before I get too deep, let me set the stage. I grew up in what people might call a normal suburban family. Mom, dad, and one sibling, my younger sister Lily, who's 2 years behind me. To most people, we probably seemed like your typical family. Dad works in insurance. Mom runs a home baking side hustle she swears is going to take off any day now. And Lily? Well, Lily has been the center of attention since the day she was born. She wasn't always this spoiled, I don't think. Or maybe I just didn't see it when I was younger. I remember birthdays where we both got gifts, even if it wasn't my birthday. She'd cry if she didn't get a present when I did, so Mom would wrap up something small to keep the peace. I didn't mind at the time. I thought that's just how things worked. But then came the little things, the way she could interrupt me at dinner without being told off, the way she always got the front seat, even when I asked first, or the time she crashed my bike and I got blamed because I should have locked it up. I spent most of my childhood trying not to rock the boat. I wasn't a quiet kid, but I learned to shrink myself, to stay out of trouble, to keep my head down. I figured if I didn't make waves, they'd eventually notice me for being the easy one, the responsible one, the one who didn't constantly break things or cause drama. Spoiler, they didn't. And then came graduation. I wasn't expecting a parade or anything. I just figured, bare minimum, they'd show up. Maybe take me out for dinner, grab a photo or two. I worked my tail off in high school. I had a part-time job, pulled straight A's, and got accepted to 3 decent universities, all without them having to nag me once. But when I walked out those double doors in my cap and gown, I didn't see them in the crowd. I scanned the bleachers over and over, thinking maybe they were running late or stuck in traffic. I texted Dad. No response. Tried Mom. Nothing. After an hour of awkward small talk with classmates and their families, I finally called home. I don't know why I expected a different answer, but hearing Mom's voice, all casual and relaxed, hit harder than I expected. Oh, hey, sweetie. How was the ceremony? Where are you? I asked. I could hear water trickling in the background, some kind of fountain, I think. Oh, we're in Napa. We booked Lily a spa weekend for her birthday. Her skin's been flaring up from stress, and, well, you know how important it is for her to feel confident. I stood there in the school parking lot, still in my gown, holding my diploma in one hand and my phone in the other, trying not to let my voice crack. But it's my graduation. There was a pause on the line, just a second or two, but long enough for me to hear her shuffle, maybe putting her mimosa down. Then she said, "We didn't think it was a big deal. You're not even doing a speech or anything, right?" I didn't respond. I just hung up. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was numb. It felt like all the oxygen had been vacuumed out of the world. I sat on the curb for a while, watching as classmates hugged their parents, posed for selfies, celebrated their big day. I just sat there, trying to process the fact that my own family prioritized exfoliation and aromatherapy over one of the biggest days of my life. That night, I ate leftover pizza alone in my room while Lily posted selfies in a fluffy white robe, hashtagging blessed and self-care queen. I muted her stories. For the next few weeks, I didn't say much. I went to work. I packed for college. I acted like everything was fine. But something shifted that day. Something permanent. A quiet, heavy crack formed in the foundation of how I saw my family. It wasn't just disappointment. It was the realization that I was never going to be the priority. Not unless I made myself one. Fast forward a year. I'd been away at college for 2 semesters. Got a scholarship, found a group of friends, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I mattered. Like I had a life that didn't revolve around being someone's afterthought. I still called home now and then, mostly out of habit or guilt. The conversations were short, mostly about how Lily was adjusting to adulthood and how she's just got so much potential. Apparently, she was prepping for her own college move. Big plans. Dream school. And guess who was orchestrating the whole thing like it was the royal wedding? You guessed it. Mom and Dad were throwing her a massive send-off. I mean caterers, custom decorations, handcrafted party favors, the whole 9 yards. They wanted everything to be perfect for her transition to university life. A transformational moment, Mom called it. I would have rolled my eyes if I hadn't been so busy grinding through finals and eating ramen. Then, out of the blue, I got a text. "Hey, sweetie, we're planning Lily's send-off party. Can you come home early and help set up? She really looks up to you, and it would mean the world if you were there to support her." That was the moment I felt something inside me snap. Not loudly, but sharp and clean, like the quiet click of a lock turning. They wanted me to help? After what they did. After skipping the one milestone in my life because Lily wanted a facial and some cucumber water? That was the moment the idea took root. I didn't respond to the text right away. I just stared at it for a long time, fingers twitching. My dorm was quiet. My roommate was out. The silence gave me space to think, to remember, to plan. Because if they wanted me to be a part of Lily's send-off, I'd do it. Oh, I'd be involved. Just not in the way they were expecting. But I'll get to that. First, let me tell you about what happened when I actually went home that summer. Because the build-up to this transformational party, that was where things really started to get interesting. When I stepped through the front door that summer, it was like I'd entered a showroom for Lily's success. The walls were plastered with framed photos of her senior portraits, graduation shots, and printed Pinterest boards of her dream send-off party. White and gold color palettes, balloons that spelled out next chapter, a sketch for a memory wall. And right in the center of the living room was a huge calendar with everything meticulously planned out, color-coded, laminated, and proudly displayed on an easel like it was some kind of battle plan. Not a single trace of my graduation or my college life, anywhere. I dropped my duffel bag by the stairs. "Hey, I'm home," I called out. Mom walked in from the kitchen carrying a tray of lavender cupcakes and gave me a distracted smile. "Hi, sweetie. Oh, good, you're early. We could really use your help." These cupcakes were supposed to have edible glitter, but Lily didn't like the texture. She leaned in for a quick side hug, then disappeared back into the kitchen without asking how my year went. No, how were finals? Or how's the dorm? Not even a "we missed you." Just glitterless cupcakes. And Lily? She didn't even come downstairs until dinner. I didn't expect a hug, but I figured I'd at least get a hey. Instead, she shuffled into the dining room like she was gracing us with her presence, eyes glued to her phone, her hair wrapped in one of those fancy towel turbans. She plopped into the seat next to Mom and muttered, "I'm starving. Did you make the roasted veggie bowl like I asked?" Mom practically leapt up. "Yes, just finishing the tahini drizzle now." Dad chuckled from his usual seat. "You've got us all working like a five-star restaurant, kiddo." I sat across from her, silently chewing a piece of bread I'd buttered myself. Nobody had asked what I wanted. Nobody had even said, "Welcome back." I forced a smile. "So, how was your senior year?" She blinked at me like she didn't even recognize my face. "Oh, good, I guess. I got into Rowbridge. You know that?" "Yeah, I know. Congrats." She nodded, clearly bored already. "It's not even that hard to get into. I only applied to, 3 schools." Dad grinned. "Still, we're proud of you. First one in the family to go to a top 10 university." I choked slightly on my water. "Oh, what?" He waved his hand like it wasn't a big deal. "You know what I mean. Prestige-wise. I mean, your school's solid, but Rowbridge has history. It's the real deal." I stared at him. My GPA had been higher than hers. I'd gotten into schools with better rankings than hers. I just chose a college that gave me a full ride. But none of that mattered. Not when Lily was involved. She was the shiny one. The investment. The golden child. I spent the next week quietly enduring every task they threw at me. Running errands, taste-testing vegan snacks, folding hundreds of tiny paper cranes for aesthetic. No one asked what I wanted to do before I went back. They just handed me lists and assumed I'd comply. I was a background character in Lily's movie. One night, while sorting through a box of decorations in the garage, I found something that made my throat tighten. My high school diploma. Still in the cardboard envelope it came in. Unopened. Unframed. I held it in my hands for a long time, just staring at it. No one had even bothered to look at it, let alone hang it up. Meanwhile, Lily's B- chemistry project was framed above the fireplace like it was a Nobel Prize. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of Lily's music upstairs. That was the first time I truly felt like I didn't belong. Like I was just a placeholder between Lily's milestones. The final straw came 3 days before the party. I was in the kitchen making myself a grilled cheese when I overheard Mom and Lily talking in the hallway. "She's not going to like the surprise," Lily said, her voice low and whiny. "She'll love it," Mom replied. "And it's the perfect opportunity to show how strong she's become. It's closure. What if she cries or something? I don't want drama at my party. She'll be fine. It's not about her, anyway." I stayed frozen by the stove, ears burning. When they left, I snuck out into the living room and checked the master event list again, looking for anything labeled surprise. There it was. Saturday, 4 p.m., special tribute. No details, just a gold star next to it. I didn't know what it was, but I had a sick feeling in my gut. The next day, I got my answer. Dad pulled me aside while I was restringing lights around the backyard pergola. "Hey, Dylan, can I ask you for a favor?" I nodded slowly. "Sure. We want you to do a little speech during the tribute part of the party. Nothing big, just a few words about Lily. You know, something sweet. Make it emotional." My stomach dropped. "Why me?" He clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Because you're her big brother. You've always been the stable one. You've got that calm presence. Plus, she really looks up to you." I wanted to laugh, or scream, or throw the spool of lights into the pool. But instead, I asked, "And this is the big surprise?" He nodded. "Yeah, that and the slideshow." I narrowed my eyes. "Slideshow? Photos from her childhood. You'll love it. There's even a picture of the two of you on your first day of school." I'd seen that photo. She was front and center, holding a glittery sign. I was half cropped out of the frame, mid-blink. I nodded numbly and finished the lights. Then I walked straight upstairs to my room and locked the door. That night, I sat on my bed with my laptop open, fingers hovering over the keys. I knew what I had to do. Not out of spite. Not even out of revenge, not yet. But because I had reached the breaking point. The moment you realize you're never going to get what you want from certain people, so you stop waiting. You stop hoping. And you start making your own way. They wanted a tribute? I'd give them something to remember. But first, I needed a plan. The next morning, Lily knocked on my door. "Hey, can you help me figure out the table layout? Mom's losing her mind." I opened the door just wide enough to see her. She was in a silk robe again, sipping some kale-colored smoothie. "Actually," I said, voice even, "I was thinking I'd surprise you too." Her eyes lit up. "Seriously? OMG, is it, like, a gift or something?" I smiled. "Something like that." She clapped her hands. "Yes. Finally. You're not as boring as I thought." That comment used to sting. Now it just rolled off. I let her skip back downstairs while I grabbed my laptop and got to work. Over the next 48 hours, while the house buzzed with party prep and frantic last-minute Target runs, I was busy contacting vendors. I cashed out my savings from my campus job, called in a few favors from classmates who owed me, and quietly booked something Lily had mentioned at least 20 times over the last year, her dream venue. A rustic barn-turned event space about 20 minutes from town. She wanted to use it for her party, but Mom said it was too pricey and unnecessary. So I rented it, and I had no intention of inviting her. But we'll get to that. Because the final push, the moment that truly set the stage, came the night before the party, when I caught Lily talking to her friend Kendra on speakerphone in her room. I wasn't snooping. Her door was half open, and I was walking down the hall when I heard my name. "He's being weirdly helpful this week," Lily said, giggling. "Like, I thought he was going to be all moody or whatever, but he's actually trying." Kendra laughed. "Isn't he, like, super lame though?" "Oh, totally. He's like a sad golden retriever. You pat him on the head, and he does whatever you want. Honestly, I kind of feel bad for him." I stood frozen, just out of sight. Then Lily said something that made my jaw tighten. "Mom said he might be moving back home after college to help with the house while I'm at school. Can you imagine? Like, EW. He'll probably live in the basement and do taxes or something." They both held with laughter. That was it. No more playing the good brother. No more quiet acceptance. I had spent my entire life swallowing my own needs so Lily could shine, and all they saw me as was backup. A fallback plan. A convenient extra set of hands. But not this time. This time, I was going to be center stage. And when the day came, I made sure everyone would see exactly who Lily and my parents really were. The morning of Lily's send-off party arrived like any other overhyped family event, chaotic, loud, and filled with the smell of burning toast because Mom insisted on making breakfast special. She was zipping around the kitchen in her floral apron, barking last-minute orders, while Dad was out back adjusting tablecloths that were already pinned down perfectly. Lily? She was upstairs, probably rehearsing her grand entrance or getting her hair curled by some friend she'd convinced to play stylist for the day. No one noticed I wasn't eating. No one noticed I wasn't dressed for the party. And no one noticed that my car, packed with bags, speakers, lights, and a carefully boxed cake, was already halfway down the street before the guests even started arriving. I left a note on my bedroom door that just said, "Had to take care of something. Be back later." That wasn't a lie. I was taking care of something. Something long overdue. When I pulled into the gravel lot of the old barn venue, the event coordinator was already waiting for me. She was a short, no-nonsense woman in her 40s named Tanya, and from the moment I booked with her, she treated this like it was the most important party of the summer, even though I hadn't told her everything. Just that it was a private celebration, that I needed full access by noon, and that the guest list was fluid. She took one look at me lugging out sound equipment from the back of my car and said, "You're gonna need help." By 11:30 a.m., the venue looked incredible. The string lights were up, the rustic bar was fully stocked with mocktail ingredients, because I couldn't afford alcohol licenses, and the DJ, my roommate Alex, who moonlights as a wedding spinner, was already setting up his set list. The guests started trickling in around noon. Not my family, not Lily's preppy classmates. These were my people, friends from college, folks from my job on campus, even my old high school English teacher who I'd run into at a bookstore and invited on a whim. Every single one of them had supported me, celebrated me, and treated me like I mattered, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The event wasn't flashy, but it was authentic. There were Polaroids hung with clothespins along the barn beams, photos of me actually living this past year, studying at midnight in the library, hiking with friends, that time I accidentally dyed my hair pink in the dorm showers, laughing, failing, growing. I called it the real send-off. It was supposed to be symbolic, a way to close the chapter on the version of myself that bent over backward for people who never saw me as more than a convenient footnote. But the truth is, I wasn't prepared for what came next. Back at home, things were starting to unravel. It started with confusion, then panic. I found out later that around 1 p.m., Mom tried to call me. When I didn't answer, she texted me, "Where are you? We're doing the tribute in 30 minutes, and people are waiting." Then came Lily's text, which was a little more direct. "Don't bail on me. This is MY Day. You promised." I didn't respond. Instead, I queued up a short video that played right before Alex kicked off the party playlist at my venue. It was a montage, not of Lily, not of family memories, but of my graduation day. I'd quietly compiled clips from classmates, old teachers, even a few phone videos someone sent me from the parking lot where I'd sat alone in my gown. Over it, I'd recorded a voiceover. I didn't say names. I didn't call anyone out directly, but I talked about what it feels like to be invisible in your own story. To be the quiet kid who thought if he just worked hard enough, someone would finally say, "We see you." To have your biggest milestone ignored while your little sister got cucumber water and eucalyptus towels. And then I said, "But the truth is, being overlooked taught me something. It taught me how to stop waiting for permission to be proud of myself." That was the moment the room got quiet. Afterward, the music started, the lights dimmed, and we danced. Not to impress anyone, not for social media, just because we were free. But freedom, it turns out, comes with a cost. When I got home later that night, the house was dead silent. I walked in through the side door and found the living room looking like a war zone. Half-deflated balloons littered the floor. Plates with untouched hors d'oeuvres sat on the table. One of the banners had fallen, slumped like it had given up halfway through cheering. And there, in the center of the room, was my mother, sitting on the couch, arms crossed, mascara smudged. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she asked, voice cold. I didn't answer right away, just closed the door behind me and set my keys down. "You humiliated us," she said, rising to her feet. "People were asking where you were. Your father had to stall. And then Lily had a panic attack during the tribute because you didn't show up." "Good," I said quietly. Her jaw dropped. "Excuse me." She deserved to feel what I felt a year ago. "You're being cruel." "No," I said, stepping forward. "I'm being honest. You didn't come to my graduation. You left me standing alone in a parking lot so Lily could get a mud wrap and some lemon water. And now you want me to dance around her party like it didn't happen." She needed that weekend. She was under stress. So was I. I was graduating, Mom. And none of you cared. Not even a picture frame. Nothing. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Maybe she didn't. Maybe I was changing too fast for her to catch up. Then Dad came downstairs. He looked tired, deflated. "I saw your little video," he said. "Real nice. Playing the victim." "It wasn't about you," I said. It was about me, and how I had to become my own support system. Lily didn't show her face that night. I assumed she was upstairs, stewing. The next morning, I left before sunrise. That should have been the end of it. But life doesn't let you cut ties that easily, especially not with family. The fallout came fast. Lily posted a long Instagram story calling me toxic and jealous, claiming I ruined her special day and turned her friends against her. Mom backed her up with passive-aggressive Facebook posts about ungrateful children who forget who raised them. Even some extended relatives chimed in, telling me I'd gone too far. I ignored it all, not out of spite, but because I was done defending myself to people who never listened in the first place. I threw myself into college, picked up more hours at work, got promoted to student lead, even started tutoring on the side to save up. Every dollar I earned was mine. Every late night in the library, every essay, every shift, it all belonged to me. No more invisible victories. But the emotional weight? That took longer to shed. There were nights I still wondered if I'd gone too far. If maybe, somehow, I was the bad guy. That guilt they'd always been so good at planting. It lingered, like smoke in a sweater. One night, a few months after everything, I was sitting on a bench outside the campus library when my phone buzzed. A text from Tanya, the venue coordinator. Hey, just wanted to let you know, we've gotten 3 booking requests from people who said they saw your party and loved the vibe. One even asked if you'd be willing to help plan theirs. You have a gift, Dylan. I stared at the screen, stunned. A gift. I'd never been called that before. The next day, I printed out flyers and posted them around campus. Need help planning an event? Let's talk. And just like that, something started. Small at first. Birthdays, graduation dinners, open mics. But each one felt like a step forward. Like I was reclaiming something. Not just my time, but my worth. For the first time in my life, people were coming to me, not because they needed something from me, but because they saw what I could do. Because they believed in me. Because I believed in me. But even as I rebuilt my confidence, the shadow of my family never fully went away. Especially not Lily. She didn't just move on from what happened. She planned to come back. And when it came, she made sure I couldn't ignore it. But I'll tell you how she did that in the next part. Because what she did next wasn't just petty. It was calculated, cruel, and it almost cost me everything. It started with an email. I was 3 weeks into the fall semester, juggling midterms and a growing side hustle as a student event planner, when I saw her name in my inbox, Lily Maddox. Subject line, hey, peace emoji. My stomach tensed before I even clicked. I hadn't heard from her directly since the party fallout, and every interaction since had been filtered through our parents' or social media subtweets. I'd unfollowed her on everything, muted mom and dad, and done my best to build distance. But there it was, her digital olive branch. The message was surprisingly short. Hey, I know we haven't talked since everything. Just wanted to say I've been thinking about you. College is harder than I thought. I miss you. If you're ever up for coffee or something, let me know. Smiley face. It was weirdly normal. No venom. No drama. No backhanded guilt trip. I stared at it for a solid 10 minutes. The old version of me. The one that still believed maybe Lily had a hidden layer of humanity beneath all the glitter and narcissism. Almost typed out a response. But the new me? He paused. Because something felt off. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I didn't respond right away, but I did a little digging. I still had a few mutuals who followed her on Instagram, and while I couldn't see her posts directly anymore, I saw what others were tagging her in. And that's when I found it. A selfie at some high-end restaurant with the caption, meeting up with my big bro trying to rebuild, smiley face, #family first. The timestamp? 12 minutes after she sent me the email. My blood ran cold. She'd never actually wanted to reconnect. She just needed the image of reconciliation. It was all fake. And I almost fell for it. I didn't respond to her email. Didn't say a word. But I did start thinking. Because if Lily wanted to play games, I was finally ready to play back. Except this time, I wasn't just reacting. I was planning. The turning point came a week later, during a campus event planning mixer hosted by the student union. I was there handing out flyers and talking with local vendors when I noticed a familiar name on the guest list. Robridge Event Society. Lily Maddox, president. I blinked at the little badge sitting on the registration table, her name printed in a fancy serif font like she'd earned it. She wasn't even a full semester into college, and she was already angling for clout. Typical Lily. Always climbing over people for the next title. The next spotlight. And as if on cue, she walked through the doors 10 minutes later wearing a tailored blazer and holding an oat milk latte like it was an Oscar. She didn't see me at first, but I watched her work the room. Charming, posing, performing. She talked to a guy from the local catering company I'd worked with last month. Laughed with two girls from the decorating team. Even tried to pitch herself as an event strategist to a student group that already had one. And then she saw me. Her face froze for half a second, just a flicker of panic, before she composed herself and gave me a perfect little wave. I nodded back, cool and unreadable. But something was different now. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. Over the next month, I learned everything I could about the Rowbridge Event Society. Turns out, it was more of a name than a real organization. Just a half-formed group with no budget and no real events under its belt. Yet. But they were ambitious. Their goal was to land a co-hosting gig for the school's annual Winter Gala, a massive fundraiser attended by faculty, alumni, and local business leaders. The gala was a big deal. The kind of event that could launch careers. And Lily had made it very clear on social media that she wanted to be the face of it. That's when the pieces clicked into place. I wouldn't just go after her emotionally. That was a game she thrived in, manipulation, guilt, gaslighting. No, if I wanted to hit her where it hurt, I had to target her brand, her image. So I started planning. Step 1 was to reach out to the gala committee directly. Through my work on campus, I'd already collaborated with a few of them, especially one grad student named Priya, who managed logistics for the business school. I casually brought up the gala during one of our weekly meetings and asked if they were still looking for co-hosts or partners. Technically, yes, she said. We have 2 groups in the running. The Event Society, which is new but loud, and your team. My team. She smiled. You don't even realize you've built one, do you? You've done more real events than any of the others. Student showcases, charity dinners, even that off-campus open mic. I played it cool, but inside I was buzzing. Step 2 was to gather allies. I started looping in some of the people I'd worked with, DJ Alex, Tanya from the barn, even one of the catering students who owed me a favor. We built a quick proposal, simple, elegant, and grounded in actual experience. No fluff, no fake credentials, just proof. Step 3, wait for Lily to sabotage herself, which, true to form, she did beautifully. A week before the committee's final decision, I got a call from Priya. Hey, weird question, she said. Did you hear about the venue drama? I blinked. What venue drama? Apparently, Lily had tried to reserve a local vineyard for the gala without securing a contract. She sent out digital mock-ups of the location with her name plastered on every invitation, curated by Lily Maddox, and had even promised custom wine tasting menus to the alumni network. The problem? The vineyard owner never agreed to host. He'd had one phone call with her, said he'd consider it, and then went on vacation. Lily never waited for a confirmation. She just assumed her charm would seal the deal. When the owner got back and saw what she'd done, he pulled the plug. People are furious, Priya said. She's trying to downplay it, but some donors are threatening to pull out if she's involved. I almost laughed, but I didn't, because this wasn't the moment to celebrate. This was the moment to strike. That weekend, I finalized my presentation. Clean visuals, real photos from past events, budget spreadsheets, backup venue options. Everything Lily had skipped in favor of aesthetic and buzzwords. On the day of the pitch, I arrived 10 minutes early. Lily showed up 5 minutes late. She was wearing another tailored blazer, but this one looked more forced, like she was trying too hard to project control. When she saw me in the room, her eyes narrowed. Oh, she said, fake smile flickering. Didn't realize we were competing. I shrugged. Didn't realize we were still talking. Her nostrils flared slightly, but she didn't reply. She sat 2 chairs away and crossed her legs like she was on Shark Tank. The committee heard my pitch first, and it was smooth. I talked about accessibility, cost-effectiveness, community partnerships. I showed them real testimonials from people I'd worked with. Priya smiled through the entire thing. When I finished, there was a pause, then quiet applause. Then Lily stood. She launched into a wordy, buzz-heavy monologue about elevated atmospheres and emotional brand synergy. She showed slides of the vineyard that was no longer available, and when someone asked about the backup venue, she hesitated. Oh, we're still in talks. They weren't. I knew that. Everyone did. Afterward, we were asked to wait in the hallway while the committee voted. Lily turned to me as soon as the door shut. You think you're clever, don't you?" she hissed. I tilted my head. "What do you mean? Hijacking my event? Undermining me? You did that yourself?" "I just showed up." She leaned closer. "They're going to pick me. They always pick me." "No," I said calmly. "Mom and Dad always picked you. That's not the same thing." She opened her mouth, then shut it. For the first time in years, Lily didn't have a comeback. We both got the email 2 days later. Subject: Winter Gala 2025, Event Partner Selection. I opened it slowly, letting the suspense build. And when I saw the words, "We're thrilled to work with you and your team," I exhaled. I didn't cheer, didn't gloat, because this wasn't about winning some sibling rivalry. This was about reclaiming control, about proving to myself that I didn't have to be anyone's shadow, that I never needed their validation to shine. But if you think that was the end of it, you don't know Lily. Because after that loss, she went quiet. Too quiet. And that's when I knew she was planning something. Something bigger. And far more personal. She disappeared for 2 weeks. No texts. No emails. No social media posts. Not even one of her cryptic, healing era updates or manicured flat-lay brunch photos. It was like Lily had ghosted the planet. Which, in her world, only ever meant one thing. She was plotting. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. She didn't lose often, and when she did, she never took it gracefully. But there was something different this time. A silence too sharp to ignore. I kept waiting for the blow to land, for her to throw me under some digital bus, spread rumors, stage another reconciliation post that made me look cold or bitter. But nothing came. Until it did. And when it did, it nearly cost me everything. It started with a phone call from Tanya, the barn venue coordinator who'd helped me throw the send-off party months ago. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks. We'd exchanged thank yous and parting emails, but she had moved on to other clients, and I had been buried in gala logistics and classwork. Her voice was tight when I answered. "Dylan, did you authorize this refund request?" My heart jumped. "What refund?" "Someone called this morning claiming to be you. Said the deposit from your party last summer was accidentally billed twice, and they needed the overcharge returned to a new account." I blinked. "What?" "I didn't process it," Tanya said. "It didn't sit right. The guy sounded rehearsed, too pushy, and he couldn't confirm your last payment method. But he gave your name, full name, and he said he had permission to act on your behalf." I sat down hard. "Did they give you a name?" I asked. She hesitated. "No, just said they were your assistant." I thanked her, hung up, and sat there, numb, because I knew exactly what this was. This was Lily's revenge. Not with fire or drama or chaos, but something quieter, smarter, scarier. She was trying to unmake my reputation, piece by piece, from the shadows. Discredit me with vendors. Undermine my work. Whisper about my dishonesty, just enough to leave a stain that would spread. And if Tanya hadn't trusted me, it might have worked. But I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. I started pulling strings. First, I contacted every vendor, every partner, every client I'd worked with over the last year. I told them what happened. Shared screenshots, receipts, anything to prove I wasn't behind it. Most of them believed me. A few were wary. But no one outright cut ties. Still, the damage was done. There were murmurs now. Doubts. And that was enough to light the fire under me. Because I realized something. I'd spent so much time building my own path, proving I didn't need validation, that I forgot how powerful it is to expose people on their own terms. So I started digging. Not to retaliate. Not yet. But to understand. To track the roots of what Lily had become, and find the one thread I could pull that would unravel everything. And eventually, I found it. It came from a freshman named Hallie. We met during a joint student-run event where she volunteered as a photographer. Sweet kid, nervous energy, always carrying a massive Canon camera like it was a baby. We grabbed coffee afterward to talk photos for the gala site, and halfway through, she blurted, "You're Lily's brother, right?" My stomach tightened. "Yeah. What?" Her eyes went wide. "Oh, I didn't mean anything. She's kind of a big deal around our dorm." I forced a smile. "Yeah, I know. She told everyone you tried to sabotage her last year. Said you used her name to book a fake venue and then blamed her when it fell through." That stopped me cold. "What?" Hallie winced. "Sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. It just seemed weird." I leaned forward. "Did she say that to you directly?" She hesitated. "Not me. But she told Zoe. And Zoe runs the student blog." I blinked. "The blog. The one that posted a leadership spotlight on Lily a few weeks back. I remembered the headline, Young Visionary to Watch, how Lily Maddox is redefining campus events. It hadn't even mentioned the venue debacle. I thanked Hallie and walked back to my apartment with one thought echoing in my head. She's rewriting the story. She wasn't just smearing me. She was polishing herself, editing out the failures, reframing the mess-ups, turning every loss into a misunderstood moment of genius. And worst of all, people were believing it. But what Lily didn't understand was that the more you twist a story, the more fragile it becomes. Because eventually, someone starts asking questions. And I was about to make sure they did. I made a video. Not for social media. Not for my friends. For the gala committee. I compiled timelines, screenshots, voicemails. Even the assistant call Tanya had recorded for her own protection. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't attack. I just laid it out, calmly, cleanly, like a prosecutor before a jury. Then I sent it privately to Priya and the rest of the leadership board with a short message. This isn't about revenge. It's about protecting the gala. I trust you to make the right decision. And then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, I got an official email. The committee has decided to remove all association with the Rowbridge Event Society from gala planning efforts, effective immediately. And then, in a separate message, a text from Priya. We saw everything. Thank you for being honest. You've got our full support. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. But it wasn't over. Not until Lily knew she couldn't touch me anymore. The final act came by accident. Or maybe fate. A week later, I was back at Tanya's venue helping prep for a small winter wedding when I saw her again. Lily, standing outside in the gravel lot, arms folded, talking to someone on the phone in a sharp, agitated whisper. I ducked back behind a parked catering van and listened. I had the gala, she was saying. I had the narrative. And now everyone's acting like he's some underdog savior. No, I don't know how he pulled this off. It doesn't matter. I'll find something else. Another headline. Then she laughed bitterly. He thinks he's better than me now. Just wait. He's not done paying for that party. My jaw clenched. She hadn't learned a thing. So I stepped out. She froze mid-call. Her eyes widened. And for once, she didn't say a word. Just lowered the phone slowly, like a caught thief. Looking for another venue? I asked calm. Silence. You know, I continued. You could have just apologized. Nothing. And if you ever want to try again, like, really try, maybe start by telling the truth. She stared at me, then scoffed. Don't act like you're some hero, Dylan. You just got lucky. No, I said, taking a step closer. I just stopped playing by your rules. And then I turned around and walked inside. I didn't look back. The gala was a success. Clean, elegant, packed with students and donors. We raised twice the expected goal, and 2 local companies reached out afterward asking to collaborate on future events. My name wasn't on any banners, but I didn't need it to be. Because when I stood at the back of the ballroom, watching people laugh and dance under the lights I'd hung, sipping drinks I'd coordinated, enjoying a night I'd built from the ground up, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. Not by them. By me. And that's all I ever needed. That night, as the last song played and the crowd thinned out, Priya clinked her glass next to mine and said, What now? You've basically run this place. I smiled. Now, I said, now I build something that lasts. Because I wasn't just the forgotten son anymore. I was the one who made them remember. And this time, I wasn't fading into the background ever again. I was sitting in the corner chair of the attorney's office, the kind of stiff, uncomfortable seat that makes you feel like you're already in trouble. My name's Oliver. I'm 29, and I had been bracing myself for this moment for weeks. The reading of my parents' will was supposed to be a formality, something sad, yes, but straightforward. They'd always preached fairness. Always said, we treat our kids equally. I believed them. I don't know why I still believe them. Maybe part of me wanted to cling to the idea that I hadn't been the black sheep all these years for nothing. My sister, Claire, strolled in late, looking like she owned the place. Designer coat, sunglasses perched on her head, even though it was raining outside. She gave me one of those tight smiles that felt more like a dare than a greeting. My stomach nodded. She'd been their favorite since day one. But this was about mom and dad, not about her. I reminded myself of that over and over as the lawyer shuffled papers and cleared his throat. The first few minutes felt like white noise, formalities, legal jargon, the kind of thing you'd half hear in a courtroom drama. Then came the big reveal. To our beloved daughter Claire, the lawyer read, "We leave the family home and its contents to be hers free and clear." My chest tightened, but I kept my face neutral. Then, without so much as a pause, he continued, "To our son Oliver, we leave," and there it was, nothing. Just a line about no material assets bequeathed. That was it. No keepsake, no letter, no explanation. Just zero. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell or storm out, though I think everyone half expected me to. Instead, I smiled, a small, unsettling smile that made Claire's own smirk falter for just a second. I stayed silent while the lawyer finished, while Claire started talking about paint colors and renovations like she hadn't just won the lottery. The moment we left the office, she was already texting her husband, grinning ear to ear. I walked to my car in the drizzle, hands shaking but not from the cold. It wasn't just about the house. It was about every family dinner where I was the punchline. Every time my achievements were brushed off, while Claire's smallest wins were celebrated like she'd cured a disease. It was about Dad bailing her out of debt more times than I could count, while telling me to stand on my own 2 feet when I asked for a loan once, that I paid back early. It was about Mom bragging to neighbors about Claire's new car, while barely remembering my job title. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop. I wasn't angry, not the explosive kind, anyway. I felt something colder, something sharper. See, I wasn't just a son they ignored. I was also the quiet one who'd been handling their joint accounts for the last 2 years, ever since Dad's forgetfulness started making bills late. I had signing privileges, access to savings, to investments. I knew where every cent was, and suddenly, I knew exactly what to do with that information. Before I touched anything, I replayed the entire day in my head. Claire's smug face, Dad's relieved look when he heard I wasn't getting anything, like a burden had been lifted. The more I thought about it, the calmer I felt. No one had even looked at me when we left the office. Not one, "Are you okay?" Not even a pat on the back. That told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in this family. The next morning, I drove to the bank. The manager knew me by name, smiled as I came in. It took 20 minutes to revoke every automatic payment that ran through accounts I controlled. Another hour to freeze certain funds for verification. When I walked out, the autumn air felt different, crisp, electric. For once, I wasn't the one sitting quietly while they decided what was fair. I didn't hear from anyone for a week. Then the text started, casual at first. "Hey, Dad says the utilities aren't auto-paying. Can you check?" I left it on read. A few days later, another. "Mortgage payment bounced. What's going on?" I said I'd look into it. By the 3rd week, the tone shifted. "Oliver, property taxes are due. We need those funds released." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Not my problem. That was the first time I let myself really grin. And that was when things started to get interesting. The silence after my "not my problem" text didn't last long. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed with Claire's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring out. She immediately tried again, then left a voice message that I didn't bother listening to right away. I knew exactly how it would sound, that passive-aggressive sweetness she'd perfected over the years, the tone that implied she was doing me a favor by even talking to me. When I finally played it later that night, I was right. "Oliver," she began, dragging out my name like she was scolding a toddler. "Listen, I know this has been a big adjustment for you, but Mom and Dad trusted you with the finances because you're responsible. You can't just stop paying things because you're upset. The house is a family asset. This affects all of us, not just you. All of us." The audacity of that line almost made me laugh. The house wasn't a family asset anymore, it was hers. Legally hers, thanks to that will. My share had apparently been whittled down to 0, but now I was supposed to keep funding her new life like nothing happened? The hypocrisy was so on brand that it almost felt comforting. By the end of the week, the messages had escalated. Dad finally texted me himself, which was rare. Usually he had Mom or Claire do his talking for him. "This is getting ridiculous," he wrote. "Taxes are due in 5 days. We can't afford late fees right now. Fix this. Fix this." As if I was the one who broke it. I stared at the words, feeling that cold calm settle over me again. Instead of replying, I turned off my phone and went for a walk. It was late, the streets were quiet, and the cool night air helped me think. I didn't want to act out of pure spite. That was too easy, too reckless. I wanted to be deliberate, to make sure every move I made had weight. When I got home, I pulled up my emails. Buried under the usual bills and work memos were several notifications from the bank, all flagged as urgent. Overdraft warnings, declined auto payments, an alert that a credit line payment had bounced. I almost felt bad. Almost. The next morning, I drove past the family house just to see what was happening on their end. Sure enough, Claire's SUV was parked out front, next to a stack of unopened mail on the porch. The paint on the shutters was already starting to chip. Dad had been meaning to fix that for years, but never got around to it. I saw her through the window pacing with her phone, probably yelling at some poor customer service rep. For a second, I thought about going up and knocking just to watch her face, but I decided against it. Let the tension simmer. That weekend, I got invited to a cousin's birthday dinner, the first family gathering since the will reading. Normally, I would have skipped it, but something told me I needed to show up this time. Needed to be seen. When I arrived at the restaurant, the energy shifted immediately. Conversations hushed, and I could practically feel every eye on me. Claire was already there, sitting next to Mom, looking put together as ever. She gave me a little wave, her nails perfectly manicured, as if we were just two siblings having a minor disagreement. I sat at the other end of the table. For the first 20 minutes, nobody said a word to me. Then, over appetizers, Mom leaned across the table and said, "Oliver, can we talk about this after dinner? We really need to get this whole situation resolved." "What situation?" I asked evenly. "The one where you left me nothing, or the one where Claire's bills keep bouncing?" The table went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Mom frowned like I'd just said something wildly inappropriate. "You don't have to be dramatic. You know this isn't personal." That was the moment I realized they still didn't get it. To them, this was just a hiccup, a little family drama to smooth over. They thought they could guilt me back into line, the way they always had. Claire jumped in then, trying to play mediator. "Oliver, we can work something out," she said, her voice dripping with faux patience. "I'm willing to let you stay involved with the finances, but you need to be reasonable. This isn't just about you. You're punishing Mom and Dad too." I set my fork down, took a slow sip of water, and said, "I'm not punishing anyone. I just stopped doing free labor for people who don't think I'm worth a single cent." Her face tightened, and for a brief moment, I saw the mask slip. She wasn't used to me talking back, wasn't used to me not playing the peacekeeper. Dinner ended early after that. People made excuses, saying they had early mornings or other plans. I didn't care. I'd made my point. As I left, Dad caught up to me in the parking lot. "Son, this is getting out of hand," he said, lowering his voice like we were conspirators. "Claire can't handle these bills on her own. You know that. Just get things back on track for now. We'll sort out the rest later." "Later like when?" I asked. Because as far as I can tell, the will was the final word. He sighed, rubbed his forehead, and muttered something about how lawyers overcomplicate things. It was almost funny. He still thought this was negotiable. Over the next couple of weeks, the pressure ramped up. Mom started calling daily, leaving voicemails about family unity and how disappointed she was in me. My aunt even called at one point, telling me I was being cruel and that Claire was under a lot of stress right now. The last straw came when I got an email from a contractor. Apparently, Claire had started renovations on the house and tried to put the deposit on one of the accounts I'd frozen. The email was a polite but firm notice that the payment had been declined. Attached was the estimate, nearly $30,000 for new floors, cabinets, and landscaping. That night, I got another text from Claire. "We need to meet. Tomorrow. This has gone far enough." I stared at it for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Something in me knew this was the turning point, the moment where everything was going to shift from passive-aggressive texts to a full-on confrontation. And honestly, I was ready for it. The next day, I didn't bother dressing up for whatever meeting Claire had in mind. Jeans, hoodie, no effort. If she wanted me to take this seriously, she could have started by taking me seriously years ago. When I pulled up to the house, I noticed two things right away. There was a moving truck parked in the driveway, and Claire's husband was standing outside giving instructions to two workers carrying furniture inside. At first, I thought maybe they were just moving some of their stuff from their apartment, but then I saw what they were carrying: my parents' old dining room table. The one we'd eaten at every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every Sunday dinner when I was a kid. My table, or at least, that's what I'd always thought. I parked and walked up slowly, almost cautiously. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice even but sharp enough to make her husband flinch a little. Claire came out the front door, arms crossed, wearing that smug smile I'd seen too many times. "We're moving in," she said simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "The house is mine now, Oliver. Might as well make it feel like home." "I see that," I said, glancing at the table being carried inside. Guess Mom and Dad's stuff didn't even make it past the first month. Claire's face didn't change. "We're donating what we don't want. It's for the best, a fresh start." I don't know why, but that line, "what we don't want," hit me harder than anything else she'd said. These weren't just objects. They were pieces of my childhood. The couch I'd fallen asleep on during family movie nights. The bookshelf Dad had built by hand in the garage. They were just clearing it all out like it was trash. "Did you at least ask Mom and Dad?" I asked, my voice quieter now. Claire tilted her head. "Ask them what?" "The will gave me the house and everything in it. They knew what they were doing." "Honestly, Oliver, you're taking this way too personally. This is just logistics." Logistics. That was the moment something inside me snapped, though not in the way I expected. I didn't yell, didn't curse, didn't make a scene. I just stood there, watching as strangers carried out pieces of my family history, and I felt something cold settle into place. "Fine," I said finally. "Do what you want. It's your house now, right? But don't call me when the bills keep coming. I'm done." I turned to leave, but before I reached my car, Claire called after me. "Oh, by the way, Dad mentioned you still have the keys to the lake cabin. He said to bring them by this week. We're taking over maintenance on that too." I froze. The cabin wasn't even part of the will. It was in a trust that Dad and I had both been managing. My name was still on every document, every account tied to it. "The cabin isn't yours," I said, turning back slowly. "Not yet," she replied, almost casually. "But Dad's going to sign it over. He said there's no point in you keeping control when you're acting like this." And there it was, the betrayal, clear as day. They weren't just content to cut me out of the house. They were going for everything. Every shared asset, every connection I had to the family's history. They wanted me erased completely, rewritten as the bitter son who chose to walk away. I didn't respond. I just got in my car and drove off, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I drove aimlessly for almost an hour, past neighborhoods I didn't recognize, until I finally pulled into an empty parking lot and just sat there. That night, Mom called. I let it go to voicemail, but I listened to it later. Her voice was calm, measured, almost rehearsed. "Oliver, we've been talking, and we think it's best if Claire takes over managing the cabin too. This fighting isn't good for anyone, and honestly, we think some distance might help you figure out what's really important. Please bring the keys by before the end of the week." What's really important? The phrase made my stomach turn. They'd made their choice, and now they were trying to make it sound like it was for my own good. The next morning, I drove out to the cabin. It was early, mist still hanging over the lake, and the air was so still it almost felt wrong to breathe too loudly. I sat on the porch steps for a long time, thinking about all the summers we'd spent here. Fishing with Dad, campfires with cousins, even the time Claire broke her arm falling off the dock, and everyone made me feel guilty for not watching her more carefully. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything smelled the same, wood smoke, lake water, dust. I walked through each room slowly, almost like I was saying goodbye, and then I sat at the kitchen table and took out my phone. I had the power to transfer control of the trust funds with a few taps, to put every asset under Claire's name right there and then. Instead, I did something else. I changed the access codes, locked everything down tighter than it had ever been, and then I drove back to my apartment, parked my car, and waited. It didn't take long. By that evening, Claire was calling again, her voice sharp now, all pretense of civility gone. "You changed the codes. The bank said you locked the trust. What is wrong with you? Do you have any idea how difficult you're making this for everyone? For everyone, or just for you?" I asked, my voice steady. She hesitated, then said, "Mom and Dad aren't going to put up with this. You're just digging yourself deeper." "Good," I said. "Let them try." I hung up before she could respond. My phone lit up again a few seconds later, then again and again. I turned it off completely and sat back on my couch, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since the will reading, I didn't feel powerless. I didn't feel like the overlooked son or the family scapegoat. I felt something else entirely, something dangerous. And I had a feeling things were about to get a lot worse before they got better. The calls didn't stop. They came morning, noon, and night. First from Claire, then from Mom, then from numbers I didn't recognize but could guess were aunts, uncles, maybe even Dad borrowing a coworker's phone when I stopped answering his. At first, I left the phone on silent, let the missed calls stack up, but by the third day, the constant buzzing was getting to me. I shut the phone off completely and tossed it in a drawer. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the dark. The city outside my window kept humming along. Cars passing, muffled voices from the street, but inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. I couldn't shake the image of the house, the moving truck, the table being carried through the door like I'd never existed. The thought that my family, my own blood, had decided I was disposable gnawed at me until I felt hollow. It didn't help that the rest of my life started fraying at the edges, too. I was late to work twice that week because I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning until sunrise. My manager pulled me aside on Friday and asked if I was okay, and I lied and said I was just tired. Even my friends noticed something was off. When I skipped game night for the third week in a row, my best friend texted, "Hey man, we miss you. You good?" I typed out 3 different replies before deleting them all and leaving him on read. How do you explain to someone that your entire family decided you were worth zero, and somehow that hurts worse than if they'd left you a single insulting dollar? By the end of the month, the silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy. The kind of heavy that pressed down on you when you were alone too long. I tried to distract myself, threw myself into work, into cleaning, into anything that might make me feel like I was in control again. It didn't really work. Then came the letter. A real paper letter, sent to my apartment. The envelope had my parents' return address, written in my mom's neat handwriting. Inside was a single page, typed. "Oliver, we've been patient. Your behavior is hurting this family. The cabin is no longer yours to control. We are in the process of transferring ownership to Claire legally, with or without your cooperation. You need to stop being difficult and think about the bigger picture. We hope you'll come to your senses and make this right before things get worse. Mom and Dad." I read it 3 times, my hands shaking by the third pass. It wasn't even the words themselves, it was the tone. Cold, businesslike, like I was some employee refusing to hand over company property. No acknowledgement of how I might be feeling, no attempt at understanding. Just a warning. I put the letter on the counter and sat there staring at it for what felt like an hour. That was my breaking point. Not anger, not even sadness, just this deep, hollow ache that I couldn't shake. My own parents had written me out of their lives so cleanly, it was like I'd never been there. That weekend, I drove out to the cabin again, not because I had a plan, but because I didn't know where else to go. It was drizzling, the kind of thin, cold rain that soaked through your clothes before you realized it. The cabin was silent, exactly as I'd left it, but stepping inside felt different this time. Heavier. I made a fire in the old stone fireplace, sat on the floor with my back against the couch, and just listened to the rain on the roof. For a long time, I didn't move. I thought about every fight, every family dinner where I was told to just let it go for the sake of peace. I thought about how many times I'd covered for Claire's mess-ups growing up, the time she crashed Dad's car and blamed me, the time she maxed out Mom's credit card, and somehow I got lectured about being more responsible with money. Somewhere between midnight and sunrise, something shifted. The ache was still there, but under it, there was this flicker of something else, resolve. If they wanted to cut me out, fine. But I wasn't going to just sit quietly and let them take everything without a fight. Over the next week, I started putting things in motion, quietly, carefully. I contacted the bank and set up notifications for every attempt to access the trust, every attempted withdrawal. I met with a lawyer, a quiet, sharp man who listened more than he spoke, and when I was done explaining everything, he nodded and said, "You have options." Those 3 words were enough to make me feel like I could breathe again. Back at work, I kept my head down, but people could tell something was changing. I wasn't smiling much, but I wasn't dragging myself through the day anymore either. At night, I stayed up late researching property law, trust management, tax implications. It wasn't revenge yet, not exactly, but it was the first step toward reclaiming some control. Then one evening, while I was knee-deep in paperwork at my kitchen table, my phone buzzed with a notification I hadn't been expecting, an alert from the bank. Someone had tried to authorize a transfer from one of the frozen accounts. I checked the details. It was Claire. She tried to move money for another renovation expense, probably thinking I'd cave by now. Instead of getting angry, I smiled. For the first time in weeks, a real smile. Because now I had proof, documented, timestamped proof, that she was trying to access funds she had no right to touch. I shut my laptop and sat back, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't over, not even close. But for the first time since the will reading, I felt something that almost felt like hope. Whatever they thought was going to happen next, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. And I was going to make sure of it. Carefully, patiently, and in a way they'd never see coming. The shift didn't happen overnight, but it was real. I could feel it in the way I carried myself, in the way I started looking people in the eye again. Something about sitting across from that lawyer had woken me up. For the first time since the will reading, I wasn't reacting, I was acting. I scheduled another meeting with the lawyer a week later, this time with a list of specific questions. He walked me through every option available to me, patiently explaining the steps I could take to reinforce my position as co-trustee of the cabin property and how to formally document my refusal to authorize any transfer. He showed me how to file notices that would make it legally impossible for my parents or Claire to move anything without my signature. When I walked out of his office that day, I felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because I finally had a plan. The next month became about quietly building a life that wasn't dependent on my family's approval or drama. I picked up extra hours at work, partly to save more aggressively and partly because the distraction felt good. My manager noticed and, to my surprise, called me into his office one morning to tell me he was impressed. "You've really stepped up lately," he said. "We've got a lead position opening soon. Think you'd be interested?" I nodded, hiding how fast my heart was beating. A lead position meant a raise, better benefits, and more control over my schedule. It also meant that for the first time, I wouldn't have to think twice about covering my own expenses or about freezing anyone else's. Outside of work, I started treating the cabin as my own sanctuary. Every Friday after work, I drive out there, bring groceries, light a fire, and spend the weekend in the quiet. It became my reset button. No calls, no family drama. Just me and the sound of the lake at night. I started cleaning it up too, fixing the loose steps on the porch, oiling the hinges that had been squeaky for years, patching the screen door myself. Something about caring for the place with my own two hands felt almost defiant. Like I was saying, this is mine too. You don't just get to erase me from this. Then came the first real turning point. My lawyer called me one afternoon with an update. The paperwork I'd filed to block the cabin transfer had gone through successfully. Any attempt to reassign the property without my consent would now be flagged legally. When I got off the phone, I laughed out loud for the first time in months. Not just a small laugh either. A full, unguarded laugh that startled even me. For once, I wasn't the one being blindsided. I was holding the cards. That weekend, I drove to the cabin again, this time with a box of supplies. New locks, new deadbolts, even a keypad entry system I'd splurged on. I spent the entire day installing everything, making sure every door and window had fresh security measures. When I was done, I stood on the porch, sweaty and covered in sawdust, and felt an incredible sense of peace. No matter what they tried next, they couldn't just walk in and take it. Meanwhile, my life in the city kept improving. I got the promotion at work and a decent raise to go with it. My coworkers took me out to celebrate, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was dragging a cloud of family drama into every conversation. Even my social life picked back up. I started going to game nights again, started saying yes to dinner invites instead of making excuses. People noticed the difference. One of my friends joked that I looked 10 pounds lighter and asked if I'd been working out. And maybe I had, not in the gym, but in the sense that every decision I made now felt like a rep strengthening something inside me. Then, one Tuesday morning, I got a text from the bank. Another attempt had been made to access the frozen accounts. But this time, instead of just declining it, I had my lawyer draft a formal notice to Claire warning her that continued attempts would constitute financial misconduct. He CC'd my parents on the email. The silence that followed was almost deafening. For 2 weeks, I didn't hear a single word from anyone. No calls, no letters, no guilt-tripping voicemails. It was bliss, but I knew better than to think they'd given up. Sure enough, the calm broke on a Saturday afternoon when Mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. I almost didn't open the door, but curiosity got the better of me. She stood there holding a Tupperware of lasagna, of all things, like this was just a casual visit. "Can I come in?" she asked, smiling like we hadn't been at war for months. I let her in, but said nothing, just waited. She sat at my kitchen table, placed the lasagna down, and sighed. "Oliver, this has gone far enough," she said gently. "You've made your point. But we can't keep living like this. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. Claire's been crying constantly. Cry me a river." I cut in, my voice sharper than I intended. She blinked at me, surprised, then continued. "We all just want to move on from this. If you'd release the funds and agree to let Claire handle the cabin, we could put this behind us." There it was, the real reason for the visit. I leaned back in my chair and looked at her, really looked at her. For years, I'd jumped through hoops for that woman, desperate for a scrap of approval. But now, all I felt was a strange calm. "No," I said simply. She stared at me, like she couldn't quite process what she'd just heard. "No, that's right," I said. "No to releasing the funds. No to giving up the cabin. No to pretending any of this is fine." For a long moment, we just sat there in silence. Then she stood, her face tight, and without another word, she left. When the door shut behind her, I exhaled slowly and felt something click into place. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was choosing to draw a line, to stop playing the dutiful son who kept the peace at his own expense. And I had a feeling that line I'd drawn was about to set the stage for everything that came next. Because if my family thought I was done just because I'd stopped answering calls, they were about to find out how much more I was capable of when I finally decided to fight back on my terms. And this time, I wasn't going to let them see me coming. The weekend after Mom's visit, I drove out to the cabin again, partly because I needed to clear my head and partly because I'd started thinking of it less as a family retreat and more as home base. The leaves had started to turn, and the whole place looked like something out of a postcard, gold and red reflections rippling across the lake, the smell of damp earth in the air. I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee and my laptop, scrolling through property records and trust documents. It had become a kind of ritual by now, something grounding. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A clause in the trust that stated if one trustee was unwilling to participate in good faith management, the other trustee could petition for sole authority. My parents must have assumed I'd never notice, but there it was in black and white. I scheduled another meeting with my lawyer first thing Monday. He leaned back in his chair as I explained what I'd found, a slow smile spreading across his face. "If they keep pushing," he said, "you could absolutely make a case that they're the ones acting in bad faith. Especially if you've got proof of unauthorized withdrawal attempts." Which, he tapped the folder of bank records I'd brought, "you do." The idea of becoming the sole trustee was tempting, more tempting than I wanted to admit. Not because I wanted to keep the cabin forever, but because I wanted the choice to be mine, not theirs. I wanted to take back every ounce of control they'd tried to strip from me. That week, I also started talking to a financial advisor. I'd never bothered before, figuring my savings were fine where they were, but now I wanted everything airtight. We set up a separate account, one only I could access, and I moved my personal savings and investments there. I also changed every password, every PIN, every security question tied to anything remotely connected to my finances. Each step felt like another brick in a wall I was building between myself and the chaos my family thrived on. Then came the email that turned everything from defense into offense. It was from a former neighbor of my parents, someone I hadn't talked to in years, who'd heard about the situation through the grapevine. "Hey Oliver," the email began. "I don't mean to stir the pot, but I thought you should know. Claire's been telling everyone at church that you stole money from the family accounts. She said you drained them out of spite and left them high and dry. People are starting to talk." I read it 3 times, my pulse pounding in my ears. She wasn't just trying to take everything from me privately. She was smearing my name publicly. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at the bank statements and email notifications I'd been collecting for months. I realized I didn't just have proof that I hadn't stolen anything. I had a complete paper trail showing every single time Claire had tried to take money she wasn't entitled to. For the first time, I saw the possibility of using it. I called my lawyer again, told him about the rumors, and asked what my options were. "If they're defaming you," he said carefully, "you could send a cease and desist. Or, if you want to push harder, you could pursue damages, especially since you have financial losses tied to this. Damages. The word sat heavy in my mind, but not in a bad way. Meanwhile, work continued to go well. The raise from my promotion hit my account for the first time, and I paid off the last of my student loans in one go. I stood in my kitchen after making that payment, staring at the confirmation email, and felt something uncoil in my chest. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely debt-free, independent in every way that mattered. I decided to channel that momentum. I started fixing up the cabin more seriously, not just repairs but improvements. New lighting fixtures, fresh coats of paint, even a used kayak I found for sale online. It wasn't just about making it nicer. It was about claiming it, shaping it into something that reflected me instead of my parents' hand-me-down taste. One Friday evening, as I was hauling lumber out of the back of my car for a small deck project, my phone buzzed with a notification, another attempted withdrawal. This time, it wasn't Claire. It was my dad. I froze, staring at the screen, and then, slowly, a smile spread across my face. It wasn't just Claire anymore. Dad had finally decided to get his hands dirty. And that, ironically, made my case even stronger, because now I could prove that both trustees were acting without my consent. I forwarded the alert to my lawyer with a simple message: let's move forward. That was the moment everything shifted. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing. I spent the next few weeks quietly gathering everything I might need. Every email, every text, every voicemail, every failed withdrawal attempt. I had them organized into folders, labeled and time-stamped. I even transcribed some of the more incriminating voicemails where Claire outright admitted to needing the money for renovations, as though it were hers by right. The next time Mom called, I actually answered. "Oliver," she said, clearly surprised I'd picked up. "We need to sit down and have a serious talk about." "We will." I cut in, my tone even. "But not until I have my lawyer present. And not until I've reviewed the last few months of account activity with him. You might want to do the same." There was a long pause on the other end. "Are you threatening us?" she asked finally. "No," I said. "I'm giving you a heads up." When I hung up, I felt that same cold calm I'd felt in the lawyer's office months ago, but stronger now. Sharper. Because now, I wasn't just defending myself. I was setting the stage. And soon enough, they were going to realize just how much power I had and how careful I'd been with it. And when that day came, there'd be no pretending it was just family drama anymore. I didn't rush the next step. That was the key. If I'd learned anything from months of being pushed, prodded, and baited, it was that patience was my greatest weapon. Revenge wasn't about an explosion. It was about a slow, precise strike that left no room for misunderstanding. The first move came through my lawyer. He drafted and delivered a formal notice to my parents and Claire stating that any further attempts to access the trust without my consent would be documented as a breach of fiduciary duty, a legal term that sounded dry, but the implications were huge. It meant that if they kept going, I could petition not just for sole control of the cabin, but for financial restitution. Within 2 days, I got a flurry of calls. Claire first, her voice tight, brittle, on the edge of snapping. "Are you kidding me?" she hissed. "You got a lawyer involved over a cabin?" "Not over a cabin," I said calmly. "Over months of unauthorized financial activity and slander. But yes, the cabin's included." "You're unbelievable," she shot back. "Mom and Dad are furious. You're tearing this family apart." "No," I replied. "I'm just refusing to keep pretending everything's fine while you all walk all over me." Then I hung up. The next call was from Dad later that evening. His tone was different, controlled, almost eerily calm, which I knew meant he was angrier than Claire had been. "Son," he said, "this is family business. Dragging lawyers into it was a mistake. If this escalates, you're going to regret it." "Maybe," I said, letting the silence stretch. "But so will you." I could almost hear him grinding his teeth on the other end. When he finally spoke again, he said, "You always were dramatic." I didn't reply, just let the silence hang until he hung up first. After that, everything went quiet for a while. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. It felt strange at first, like the calm before a storm. And then one morning, I got an email from my lawyer. My petition for sole control of the trust had been filed and accepted for review. That was when I decided to go one step further. I compiled everything: the bank alerts, the voicemails, the screenshots of texts, The letter they'd sent threatening to transfer the cabin without my consent into a single file. I wrote a short, clear statement at the top. This is a complete record of my family's attempt to remove me from shared assets and spread false rumors about my character. Then I sent it to every single extended family member who had reached out to scold me or pressure me over the last few months. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. The responses started trickling in that afternoon. Some were stunned. I had no idea. I can't believe they did this. Others were less sympathetic, telling me to keep it private, but I ignored those. By the end of the week, the gossip network that Claire had used against me had turned against her. I started hearing from cousins who told me she'd been crying to anyone who would listen, claiming I'd made her look bad. That Friday, I drove to the cabin as usual. I brought my laptop, my new documents, and a bottle of good whiskey. I sat on the porch watching the sun go down over the lake, my phone buzzing every few minutes with new notifications, messages from relatives, from neighbors, even from people I barely knew, all taking my side. Then, just after dark, my phone buzzed again, a text from Claire. "You win. Are you happy now?" I stared at it for a long moment before replying. "I'm not looking to win, Claire. I just wanted you all to see that you can't cut me out of everything and still expect me to clean up your messes." Her reply came fast. "You ruined my reputation. Everyone's talking about me." "No," I wrote back. "You ruined your own reputation. I just showed people the truth." And then I turned my phone off for the night. The following Monday, my lawyer called with the news I'd been waiting for. Based on the documentation of unauthorized withdrawal attempts, the court had granted my petition. I was now the sole trustee of the cabin property. I didn't cheer, didn't gloat. I just sat there in my apartment, staring at the paperwork in my hands, feeling a quiet, deep satisfaction settle over me. The next day, I sent a single email to my parents and Claire with the attached legal order and a short note. "The matter is resolved. Please direct all future communications about the cabin to me directly." I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one. But that weekend, when I drove to the cabin, I noticed something strange. The porch light was on. For a second, I tensed. Had they tried to get in again? I unlocked the door and stepped inside, heart pounding, but everything was exactly as I'd left it. Then I saw it, a single envelope sitting on the kitchen table. No name, no note, just a check inside for the exact amount of the overdue property taxes. I stood there for a long time, staring at it, then set it aside and made a fire in the fireplace. This wasn't an apology, not really, but it was acknowledgement, and maybe, just maybe, the first sign that they finally understood I wasn't someone they could control anymore. And if they didn't understand yet, well, I had plenty more ways to remind them. Because for the first time, I wasn't scared of losing my family. I was starting to wonder if they were scared of losing me. And honestly, they should be. When I came back from the cabin that Sunday evening, I felt lighter than I had in months. It wasn't just about winning legal control. It was about finally reclaiming my own peace of mind. But the fallout didn't take long to arrive, and it came harder than I expected. By Monday morning, I woke up to find over a dozen messages waiting for me, from Mom, Dad, even Claire. The tone had changed completely. Gone was the righteous fury, the self-importance, the patronizing guilt trips. Now it was quiet panic. Mom's message was the longest. "Oliver, we just got the paperwork. We didn't think it would go this far. Your father is not well right now. He's upset. He says the family is falling apart. Please, can we meet and talk? Privately. No lawyers." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a shower, made myself coffee, and drove to work. By the time I got to my desk, there were 3 more messages from Claire, short, frantic ones. "People won't stop asking me questions. Dad blames me for this. He won't even look at me. You've made your point, okay? Are you happy now?" I didn't reply to those either. I wasn't interested in gloating or trading jabs anymore. The point had never been revenge just for revenge's sake. It was about balance. About making sure they understood I wasn't the punching bag anymore. The next weekend, I agreed to meet them. Not at the family house, not at the cabin, but at a neutral coffee shop downtown. When I walked in, they were already seated. Mom looked tired, older than she had a few months ago. Dad sat stiffly, arms crossed, his jaw set like he was holding back everything he wanted to say. Claire had sunglasses on even though we were inside, probably to hide that she'd been crying. "Oliver," Mom said softly, like she was approaching a wild animal. "We just want to talk." I sat down, calm and quiet, and waited. It was Dad who spoke first. "You embarrassed us," he said flatly. "Dragged our name through the mud with the entire family. Claire can't even show her face at church right now." I didn't flinch. "Good. Maybe now you all know how it feels to be on the outside." "That's not the same," Claire snapped, pushing her sunglasses up onto her head. "You could have just come to me. Instead, you went nuclear." "You went nuclear first," I said evenly. "You cut me out of the will. You tried to take the cabin behind my back. You told everyone I stole from you. Don't act shocked when I refuse to keep playing along." Mom put a hand on Claire's arm before she could reply. "Oliver," she said carefully, "we made mistakes. I see that now. We should have handled things differently." That caught me off guard. For a moment, I just stared at her, trying to decide if she was being sincere. "Do you know what it felt like?" I said slowly. "To sit in that lawyer's office and hear that I got nothing? Not even a letter, not even a token keepsake? Do you know what it's like to walk out of that room and realize your parents just told you you're worth zero?" Mom's face crumpled, and for once, she didn't have a quick answer. "You didn't just leave me out of the will," I continued. "You made it clear that I was never really part of this family the way Claire was. So yeah, I froze the accounts. Yeah, I got a lawyer. And I'd do it again." For the first time since this all started, Dad didn't argue. He just looked away, staring out the window, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he couldn't spit out. Finally, Mom spoke again. "We can't undo the will," she said quietly. "But we can make things right moving forward. We want to settle things with you formally. No more behind-your-back decisions. No more assumptions." It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was the closest I was ever going to get. Over the next few weeks, things began to shift. Slowly, awkwardly, but undeniably. Claire stopped trying to access accounts and even sent me a short, stiff message acknowledging my role as trustee. My parents stopped calling every time a bill was due and started handling their own finances, something they hadn't done in years. Extended family members who had taken Claire's side at first reached out to me, some to apologize, some just to say they'd been wrong. I didn't rub it in. I didn't need to. The truth was out there now, and everyone could see it for themselves. A month later, I hosted my first gathering at the cabin. Not a family event, not yet, but a few close friends. We grilled on the deck, played music, and kayaked out on the lake under the sunset. At one point, I stood on the porch with a drink in my hand and looked around at the life I was building, one that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. That night, as my friends packed up to leave, my phone buzzed with a single new message. It was from Dad. "Taxes were paid on time this year," it read. "Thanks for handling things." I stared at it for a long time before replying with 2 words. "You're welcome." And as I locked up the cabin and stood on the porch watching the moon rise over the lake, I realized something. They might never fully understand what they'd put me through, but they understood enough. Enough to stop underestimating me. Enough to treat me like someone who couldn't just be erased. For the first time, I wasn't just part of the family out of obligation. I was part of it on my own terms. And that was the moment I knew I'd finally won. The last time I willingly attended a full family Easter brunch, I was 26 and freshly heartbroken after a long-term relationship ended in a spectacular pile-up of "it's not you, it's me," and mutual emotional burnout. This year, at 32, I had no such excuse to avoid it, and somehow I let myself be guilted into showing up, despite every instinct in my gut warning me to stay away. I'm Nate, by the way. Nate Williams. I live a relatively quiet life on the coast of Maine, where I run a small architecture firm and spend my weekends fixing up an old beach house my grandfather left to me. It's not glamorous, and certainly not flashy, but it's peaceful. And more importantly, it's mine. The beach house is going to be important, by the way. You'll see. The brunch was being hosted at my parents' place. Your classic New England colonial with white shutters, stone steps, and the kind of cold, formal energy that only came out when company was over. My mom, Beverly, thrives on appearances. If she could design a perfect life, it would involve an HGTV home tour, 3 golden retrievers, a hedge fund, and grandchildren she could dress in matching cardigans. My dad, Richard, was more reserved, but sharp as a tack and never one to say much unless something absolutely needed to be said. And then there was my brother, Kyle. Kyle. Golden boy. Family man. Father of 3. and arguably the biggest thorn in my side since the day he learned how to lie and smile at the same time. Kyle is 35 and has somehow built an entire personality around the fact that he has children. He and his wife, Hannah, are that brand of insufferably wholesome, matching Christmas pajamas, live laugh love signs, and Instagram perfect breakfasts that somehow look exactly the same every Sunday. To their credit, the kids are sweet. But Kyle? He wears fatherhood like a crown, constantly reminding everyone, especially me, that he's the one doing the real work in the family. Never mind the fact that I financially helped him twice during rough patches in his entrepreneurial journey, or that I've watched his kids more times than I can count while he and Hannah went off on couples retreats or networking cruises. Kyle's always believed that because he has kids, the world owes him a round of applause and a line of deference. And apparently, this Easter, he decided that line included my beach house. I arrived a bit late to brunch. Traffic had been brutal, and I debated turning around more than once. But when I stepped onto the porch, I pasted on my best family smile and knocked twice. The door opened almost immediately, and there was Kyle, beaming like he was running for mayor. "Nate, look who finally decided to show up." "Traffic," I said with a shrug. Sure, he said, stepping aside. "Hey, at least you don't have to wrestle 3 kids into the car. That's a whole other kind of hell." I offered a tight smile and moved past him. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon rolls and egg casserole. My mom emerged from the kitchen, flour on her cheek, and gave me a quick peck. "There you are, honey. Thought we lost you to the waves. You know I live 15 minutes away, right?" She laughed like I'd said something charming instead of mildly sarcastic, then ushered me into the dining room. The table was already full, my dad at the head, reading glasses perched on his nose, Hannah setting down a pitcher of orange juice, and the kids fiddling with their cloth napkins. I took the empty seat across from Kyle. "Started without me?" I joked, noting the half-empty mimosa glass in front of him. "We had to keep the kids on a schedule," Hannah said gently. "It's nap rotation day." I didn't bother asking what that meant. The first 20 minutes went as expected, light conversation, updates on the kids' school projects, my mom subtly probing for any signs of a new girlfriend. I answered vaguely, said work was keeping me busy, which was only half a lie. I noticed Kyle kept glancing at me between bites of quiche, eyes narrowed just slightly, like he was waiting for the right moment. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. It started with a toast. "Well," Kyle said, raising his glass dramatically after the plates were cleared, "before we get to dessert, I just want to say how grateful I am for family, and especially to Nate, my brother, who's been such a help over the years. We don't say it enough, but you've always been there." I blinked, unsure if this was sincere or sarcastic. "Thanks." He grinned. "Which brings me to something I wanted to talk about today. Something kind of exciting." "Oh no, not at the table. Not like this. I've been thinking a lot about the future," he continued. "You know, planning for the kids, building legacy, that sort of thing." My mom immediately lit up, nodding along. "Of course, yes. So important." "And I was talking with Hannah," Kyle said, looking at her with an exaggerated warmth. "And we had this idea. It's kind of out there, but hear me out." The room was still. "We think it's time the beach house goes to someone who's actually going to raise a family in it." There it was. No preamble. No sugarcoating. I laughed. I actually laughed, thinking he had to be joking. "You mean visit it more often?" "No," Kyle said, still smiling. "I mean live in it. You're always so busy with work and travel and bachelor stuff. You don't even use the place half the time. Meanwhile, we've got 3 kids who would love to grow up near the water." "You're serious?" I said flatly. "Completely." Hannah chimed in, as if this had been an ongoing family discussion I'd just happened to miss. "It would mean the world to us. And honestly, Nate, it just makes sense." My dad cleared his throat, but Kyle steamrolled ahead. "You don't even have kids," Kyle added, the smile finally dropping from his face. "What are you holding on to it for?" "Nostalgia." My jaw clenched. "Because it was left to me. Granddad gave it to me." "Exactly," Kyle said, jabbing his finger into the table for emphasis. "He gave it to you, but he wanted it to be for the family. Not to sit empty half the year while you play at being a coastal bachelor." The silence that followed was sharp enough to slice ham. My mom fidgeted with her napkin. Hannah looked smug. My dad kept his eyes on his glass, but his grip tightened just slightly. I took a breath. Then another. "I'm not giving you the house," I said evenly. Kyle's smile vanished. Why not? Because it's mine. Because I've spent the last 6 years keeping it from falling apart. Because I loved Granddad, and I respect his wishes. And because I don't owe you anything, Kyle. That's when his fist hit the table. Not hard enough to knock anything over, but loud enough to jolt the kids and freeze the room. You're being selfish, he snapped. You don't even understand what it's like to have responsibilities. You're single. You have no one. You think fixing up some rundown shack makes you better than me. No, I said, standing slowly. But refusing to hand over my property because you feel entitled to it doesn't make me the villain. Hannah's voice was tight. You don't have to be cruel, Nate. I turned to her. You want cruel? Try making someone feel worthless just because they don't fit into your little mold of suburban perfection. That's when Kyle stood too, and in one sweeping motion, knocked over his glass. It shattered against the tile with a loud crack. The kids screamed. My mom gasped. My dad stood up and barked. That's enough. Kyle's mouth opened, but before he could speak, my dad pointed at him with a trembling hand. You've always been the problem, Kyle. Dead silence. My brother blinked. What? You heard me, Dad said. You've spent your whole life demanding things that were never yours to begin with. You think just because you reproduced, the world has to hand you a trophy. You're not a king. You're not even a decent son right now. Kyle looked stunned. My mom opened her mouth, then shut it. Hannah pulled the kids toward her, whispering something I couldn't hear. I took out my phone. What are you doing? Kyle asked. Calling my lawyer, I said calmly, pressing the contact. For what? I looked him square in the eye as the line rang. To initiate the transfer. It's time you all learn the truth. And that's when I walked out of the room. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in my car as a very familiar document loaded onto my phone. A document Kyle didn't know existed. Not yet. It had been 33 minutes since I walked out of that dining room and told my brother I was initiating the transfer. I hadn't driven away. I just sat in my car, hands on the wheel, staring out through the windshield as the weight of the moment sank in. My phone rested on the passenger seat, the PDF still open. Page 2 of the trust document had my name on it in bold letters, right next to a clause that Kyle had probably never even imagined existed. One line. That was all it took. But I wasn't ready to go nuclear just yet. Not until they made it absolutely necessary. I don't know why I expected anything different from that brunch. Maybe some part of me still hoped my family would finally treat me like more than a placeholder. The spare. The backup plan. I wasn't the firstborn. I wasn't married. I wasn't a parent. In my mother's eyes, those things disqualified me from being important. And in Kyle's eyes, they made me a storage locker he could raid whenever his picture-perfect life started cracking. I watched the front door from my car. Nobody came out. No one texted. No one called. I waited 10 more minutes, then turned the key and drove off. Not back to my place, but to the beach house. It was still cool that early in spring, but the sun was out, and the drive along the coast helped shake the edge off my anger. As soon as I turned onto the gravel path and saw the old cedar shingles and the wraparound porch, my chest loosened. This place wasn't just property. It was peace. It was Saturday morning pancakes with Granddad. It was helping him patch up the roof one summer while he told me stories about how he and my grandma had built it with their bare hands. He'd left it to me for a reason, and I'd kept it standing, not just structurally, but spiritually. Kyle didn't know the first thing about taking care of something that couldn't be posted with a #blessed caption. I stayed at the house for the rest of the weekend. Didn't answer calls. Didn't check emails. I needed space. But when I finally returned home Monday morning and turned my phone back on, the real storm hit. 32 missed messages. 12 from Kyle. 10 from my mother. A few from extended family I hadn't spoken to in months. The subject line of one email from my mom just read, "You're being dramatic." Kyle's first voicemail came through the moment I connected to Wi-Fi. "Nate, what was that? You made a scene in front of my kids. You embarrassed me. Us? And for what? A stupid house? You don't even have anyone to share it with. Call me back. Fix this." The next one was shorter. "Okay, if this is about what I said, maybe I went too far. But you seriously need to grow up." Then came the text from Mom. "Honey, we need to talk. Kyle told me everything, and I think you're being very reactive. This family needs unity, not tantrums." A tantrum. Right. Because refusing to be steamrolled was now categorized as immature. But I didn't reply. Not yet. That night, I got an unexpected knock on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and sighed. It was Kyle. He had that smile on again. The one he always used when he wanted something but didn't want to ask directly. "Nate," he said as I opened the door, "can I come in?" I didn't move. Why? Because we're brothers. And because I think we both said things we didn't mean. I stepped aside, mostly to avoid a scene in the hallway. He walked in and immediately scanned the place like he was evaluating it. Like he was judging me. My walls weren't bare, but they were minimalist. My couch was a little old. My dining table was mismatched on purpose. It didn't have the Pottery Barn chic vibe he was used to. "You know," he said, sitting down, "this whole thing could have gone a lot smoother if you hadn't stormed out like a drama queen." I sat across from him. "You demanded I hand over my house because I don't have kids. What did you think would happen?" Kyle exhaled and leaned back, spreading his arms. "Look, I get it. You're sensitive. You always have been. And you've always been entitled." He raised an eyebrow. "Entitled? Me? Nate, I've earned everything I have." I blinked. "You mean the down payment mom and dad gave you for your house? Or the time I covered your rent when your startup collapsed?" "That was years ago." "Yeah, and I never saw a dime of it back." Kyle rolled his eyes. "It's not about money. It's about what makes sense. You live alone. You don't even use the beach house. My family needs that space. You don't need it. You want it. There's a difference." We sat in silence for a moment. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You're going to die alone in that house, Nate. Is that what you really want?" It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. I stood. "You need to leave. Come on, man. Now." He left. But he made sure to drop one last line on his way out the door. "You're going to regret this." That week, the text from my mother intensified. She asked me to be the bigger person, told me I should think about the children, and even tried to remind me how much Kyle had gone through lately with work stress. Every message came with the same underlying current. Why can't you just give him what he wants? It wasn't just about the house. It never had been. It was about control. It was about erasing boundaries. And then the betrayal came. I got a call from a friend of mine who worked in real estate. We'd gone to college together, and he now handled some properties in our area. He sounded uncomfortable. "Hey, Nate. Quick question. Did you list the beach house?" I frowned. "What?" "No." He hesitated. "Because someone tried to." "What do you mean tried to?" He cleared his throat. "Someone contacted our office claiming they had power of attorney on your behalf. They said they wanted to begin the paperwork to transfer ownership and eventually list it as a rental, short-term, like Airbnb stuff. But the documents didn't check out. Your name wasn't on anything they sent." My mouth went dry. "Who was it?" He said the name before I even asked. "Kyle." I thanked him and hung up. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't surprised. I was angry, so angry I felt cold. Kyle had crossed a line, and not just a petty one. He'd committed fraud, or at least attempted to. That was enough. I called my lawyer that night. Not to bluff, not to posture, but to protect myself. "I want everything documented," I told her. "I want to make it absolutely clear that no one else has any claim to the house. I want Kyle legally blocked from even approaching it. And I want to enforce the trust." She didn't hesitate. "We'll lock it down. Do you want to pursue charges?" I paused. "Not yet." The next day, I got a message from my dad. Just 5 words. "Come by. We need to talk." He wasn't the type to send cryptic texts, and he almost never took sides. So I went. When I arrived, he was in his study, an old room with wood paneling and a dusty globe that hadn't moved in years. He gestured for me to sit and didn't say anything for a while. Just poured 2 glasses of scotch and handed me one. "I saw what he tried to do," he finally said. My eyebrows raised. "How?" He gave me a tight smile. "I have eyes. And friends." I took a sip. And I'm tired, Nate. Tired of watching your brother manipulate this family. Your mother shields him because she thinks raising a family is the ultimate virtue. But you've built something. Quietly. Honorably. And for some reason, you keep getting punished for it." I didn't speak. I wasn't used to being praised by my father. Not like that. "I didn't know about the trust clause until your grandfather's lawyer called me yesterday," he continued. "Smart move. That caught me off guard." "Wait, he called you?" My dad nodded. "Apparently your grandfather anticipated this. Not necessarily Kyle, but the possibility of future disputes. That clause gives you full legal protection and blocks any third-party claim unless explicitly approved by you. It's airtight." "Why didn't he tell me about it before?" "Because he knew you wouldn't abuse it. That was the moment it all shifted for me. The betrayal had stung. The favoritism had worn me down over the years. But now I knew. Someone in this family had believed in me. Granddad saw this coming, and he chose to protect me, even after he was gone. But I wasn't the only one with cards left to play. Because what Kyle didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the beach house wasn't just under a trust. It was under a second trust too. One that had been quietly growing in value. And it had a clause of its own. One that was about to make this whole thing a lot more complicated and a lot more public. For the first time in weeks, I slept. Not well, not deeply, but without waking up drenched in adrenaline or fury. It was the kind of sleep you get after a long fever. Not restful, but empty. And for now, that was enough. When I opened my eyes the next morning, I stared at the ceiling for a long time, letting the gray light filter in through the blinds. It was a new day, and I had just hit the lowest point in my family's history. Kyle had tried to steal my house. Not just argue over it. Not guilt-trip me or manipulate me in front of the family. He had actively, deliberately, and illegally tried to assume control of my property, then had the audacity to parade around like I was the one causing problems. And Mom, she hadn't said a word about it. Not even after the attempted real estate transfer. Not when I stopped answering calls. Not when I skipped her check-in brunch the following Saturday. The silence from her side felt colder than Kyle's betrayal. At least Kyle had been open about his ambition, even if it was disguised under self-righteous garbage. My mom. Her silence meant consent. She wanted me to roll over. She expected me to give up and let Kyle win, like always. I didn't. But I also didn't lash out. I didn't retaliate. Not yet. Instead, I started building, quietly, carefully, and piece by piece. It started with the second trust. A few days after my talk with Dad, I called my grandfather's old attorney. He was retired now, but his son had taken over the practice, and he still lived in town. I asked if we could talk. In person. We met at a quiet cafe downtown. He was thinner than I remembered, hair completely white now, but his mind was sharp as ever. As soon as I mentioned the secondary trust, he smiled like I'd passed some kind of test. "You're the first one to ask about it," he said. I blinked. "You mean Kyle?" "No one even knows it exists, Nate. It was created under a different name. Your grandfather wanted it that way." I sat back, stunned. "Why?" He leaned in. "Because he believed in planning for both war and peace." I found out that day that the beach house wasn't just a nostalgic piece of family history. It sat on a highly desirable plot of land, and over the past decade, the value of the property had quietly tripled. My grandfather had anticipated this. So he set up a second trust, one that included not just the land the house sat on, but a strip of undeveloped land behind it that had access rights grandfathered in. The second trust wasn't tied to my name publicly. It was protected, dormant, and waiting. And now that Kyle had made his move, I was legally in a position to activate it. The only thing it needed was a trigger, and Kyle had given me one. I walked out of that cafe with more than just a legal advantage. I walked out with clarity. But even with that win tucked away in my back pocket, the next few weeks weren't easy. The fallout came slowly. At first, it was just the distance, unanswered texts, the silent removal from family group chats, the absence of invitations to Sunday dinners. Then came the smear campaign. It started with a phone call from my Aunt Lisa. "Nate," she said, lowering her voice like she was about to confess to espionage. "Did you really kick Kyle's kids out of the beach house?" "What?" "That's what your mother said. That you showed up and told them never to come back. That you called them parasites." I nearly choked. "Lisa, I've literally never said that in my life. I haven't even seen the kids since Easter." She was quiet. Then she sighed. "I figured. Just wanted to hear it from you." And that's when I realized the full scope of what was happening. Kyle and my mom weren't just rewriting the story. They were actively painting me as unstable, as cruel, as someone unfit to manage the legacy of the house. A few days later, I got an email from an old family friend, a pastor who had known my grandparents well. "I'm sorry to hear what's happening between you and your brother. Please know that you're all in my prayers. But if you ever want to talk, I'd be happy to help you sort through whatever pain you're carrying." Whatever pain I'm carrying. They made it sound like I was the villain of some cautionary tale. Some broken man hoarding a house out of bitterness and loneliness. That one stung. I won't lie, I spiraled a bit after that. I canceled a few work meetings. Turned down new projects. I couldn't focus. Every time I opened my laptop, I saw Kyle's smug face in my head, or my mom's disappointed frown. I knew I was doing the right thing, but it didn't feel like it. It felt like betrayal, not mine, but theirs, and betrayal always cuts deepest when it comes from people you still, stupidly, want to love you. But in that quiet spiral, something started to shift. One night, I drove to the beach house again. It was late, almost midnight, and I hadn't told anyone I was going. I just grabbed a jacket, packed a thermos of coffee, and left. When I got there, I walked out to the back porch and sat down. The ocean was dark and calm. The wind was sharp. The stars were out, and for the first time in weeks, my thoughts slowed down. I remembered helping Granddad repaint the porch railing, both of us covered in white specks, laughing about how neither of us was cut out for this contractor stuff. I remembered him showing me how to change out an old breaker box, or the time we tore out the kitchen tiles and replaced them with slate. He believed in doing things yourself, in ownership, in legacy, not the kind you leave on Instagram, but the kind you build one careful decision at a time. That's when I made mine. I went back to work, not just at the firm, though I did dive into a new set of residential projects with a vengeance, but at the house, too. I filed the paperwork to secure both trusts. I hired a landscape architect to help plan a coastal preservation design for the property, which would make it ineligible for rental zoning. I installed a new security system and rewired the alarm with a remote access app. I even contacted a local nonprofit that organized educational field trips for inner-city kids, offering the house as a summer field site for marine biology students, something my grandfather would have loved. And the best part? None of this needed Kyle's approval. Not a single thing. He couldn't stop it. He didn't even know it was happening. I kept it quiet, like laying bricks in a foundation. No big announcements. No social media posts. Just quiet progress. And slowly, the weight lifted. Work became fulfilling again. My client list grew. I started getting invitations to speak at architecture seminars, even got quoted in a small magazine feature about sustainable coastal design. I took weekend trips up the coast, spent time reading, reconnected with old friends. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rebuilding. Alone? Yes. But for once, being alone didn't feel like failure. It felt like freedom. And that's when Kyle made his next move. It was a Friday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk, finishing a proposal draft, when I got a notification from the beach house security app. Front gate camera, motion detected. I opened the feed. There he was, Kyle, standing at the front gate with his arms crossed, wearing a smug expression and holding a piece of paper. His wife was in the car behind him. The kids weren't there. I watched as he pressed the intercom. "Nate," he said to the camera, "I know you can hear me." I didn't answer. He held up the paper. "This is a petition for shared ownership. I talked to a lawyer. If you want to do this the hard way, we can go to court. But once the judge sees you've been emotionally unstable, hostile toward your own family, and using the property for non-residential purposes, they'll consider that grounds for a forced equity split." I stared at the screen. He actually thought he could bluff his way into a legal claim. He didn't know about the zoning changes. He didn't know about the second trust. He didn't know about the nonprofit deal, or the preservation contract, or the very airtight clause that gave me sole authority to determine what family use even meant. I watched as he pressed the intercom again. "This isn't over," he said. "You don't get to shut us out just because you're bitter and lonely. We're family, Nate. And if you don't open this gate, I swear." I ended the feed. And that's when I picked up the phone. Not to call Kyle, but to call my lawyer. "It's time," I told her. "Let's begin." She didn't even ask what I meant. We both knew. The Monday after Kyle tried to bluff his way into a court battle, I walked into my lawyer's office with a different posture. Straighter. Firmer. It's weird. I hadn't realized how much I'd been carrying until I finally set it down. The shame. The guilt. The decades of being the fallback son. The one who didn't get the spotlight because he didn't have the right family photo for the Christmas card. But after everything, the lies, the manipulation, the fake power of attorney stunt, I was done playing nice. It was time to fight fire with fire. Not with rage. With precision. Margot, my lawyer, had been waiting for me. Her office was a modest brick building near the harbor, nothing flashy, but her desk was always spotless and her mind razor sharp. She slid a manila folder across the desk before I'd even sat down. "That's the preservation clause, finalized and signed by the county," she said. "Zoning is officially locked. No rentals. No subdivisions. No joint residential claims. That land is now legally protected as educational and environmental property unless otherwise revoked by you. I opened the folder and scanned the stamped document. It felt heavier than paper, like a sword I hadn't realized I'd been forging. He can't touch it now, I said. Not even with a wrecking ball, she replied. The only way he could argue any claim to it is if you voluntarily gave up your rights. And after the fraudulent real estate stunt? That's not happening. I nodded. Perfect. Now, let's go one step further. Margot raised an eyebrow. Go on. I want to make a statement, I said. Not just a legal win. Something public. Something that puts an end to the idea that I'm the selfish one. That I'm the unstable one. She smiled slowly. I was hoping you'd say that. And so the setup began. Step 1. Documentation. We compiled every interaction between me and Kyle over the past year. The texts, the emails, the voicemails. The fake power of attorney attempt, which my real estate friend was more than happy to provide a written statement about. The footage from the security cam where Kyle threatened to take me to court. Every passive-aggressive group chat message. Every snide remark from Hannah pretending to just be concerned. It was a full dossier of narcissism, entitlement, and manipulation, neatly categorized in labeled folders. Step 2. The board meeting. Not a literal board meeting, a family one. That required a little finesse. I reached out to Aunt Lisa first. She had always been the one person in the family who seemed to straddle the line between impartiality and empathy. She didn't blindly defend Kyle, and she hadn't erased me from her life just because I didn't show up with a stroller and diaper bag. Lisa, I said over the phone, would you be willing to host a family dinner next weekend? Just the core group. There was a pause. That depends. Is this about the house? Yes, I said, but not in the way you think. She agreed. Step 3. Setting the bait. I sent a text to Kyle. Short. Controlled. Family dinner at Lisa's next Saturday. I'll be there. I think it's time we cleared the air. No explanation. No emotion. Just enough mystery to stir the pot. I didn't expect him to respond, and he didn't. But the read receipt was there, which meant he'd seen it. I could imagine the conversation that followed. Him showing Hannah the message, spinning theories about what I was planning. Him pacing their kitchen, wondering if I was bluffing or laying a trap. Good. Let him wonder. Let him sweat. In the days leading up to the dinner, I kept busy. I scheduled a meeting with the nonprofit and finalized the educational agreement. I posted an update on my firm's website about our newest eco-design project, a subtle nod to the Beach House initiative, but without naming names. I made sure everything was backed up. Every contract, every document, every recorded voicemail. Because Kyle wasn't just a spoiled sibling anymore. He was a liability, and he still didn't know I'd locked him out for good. The day of the dinner arrived, and I drove to Lisa's with a strange sense of calm. Not joy, not vengeance, just clarity. The kind that comes when you finally stop justifying your pain to people who benefit from your silence. Lisa's house was warm and bright, with the faint smell of rosemary chicken drifting from the kitchen. She greeted me at the door with a hug. No questions, no judgment. Just a quiet understanding. They're already here, she said softly. Try to keep it civil. I smiled. No promises. In the dining room, I found them all. My parents, Kyle and Hannah. No kids, thank God. Even Uncle Tim and Cousin Mark had shown up, though they looked more like observers than participants. The room buzzed with tension, like everyone was waiting for the fuse to spark. Kyle was seated at the far end of the table, legs crossed, trying way too hard to look relaxed. Nathan, he said, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. Glad you could join us. I ignored the tone and sat. I appreciate everyone coming, I said, my voice steady. I wanted to clear the air, but I also wanted to clarify a few things, legally and personally. My mom cut in before I could continue. Nate, honey, I really think. I held up a hand. Please, just listen. She went quiet. I reached into my bag and pulled out the file folder. Not the whole dossier, just the highlights. These are records of every attempt Kyle has made to claim ownership of my property, I said, including the forged documents submitted to a real estate agency. I also have a notarized statement from the agent involved. Hannah's face paled slightly. Kyle clenched his jaw but said nothing. I have video evidence of Kyle arriving at the property without permission, issuing threats, and stating his intention to pursue legal action based on a completely fabricated claim of emotional instability. Lisa's eyes widened. My dad leaned forward, elbows on the table, silent but watching closely. And just for clarity, I continued, the beach house isn't just a house. It's now part of a preservation trust. Zoned, protected, legally untouchable without my explicit permission, which Kyle will never have. Now Kyle spoke. So what? You came here to brag? To wave your little papers around and act like you're some genius? What's your endgame, Nate? Burn every bridge in the family just to prove a point. I looked him dead in the eyes. No, I came to make it clear that the old dynamic is over. You don't get to bully, guilt, or manipulate your way into things that don't belong to you. You've played the family man card like it's a shield, but being a parent doesn't give you a moral pass. My mother looked stunned. Nate, that's your brother. I turned to her. And I'm your son. But for some reason, I've never been treated like one. Just a backup account for when Kyle's life ran out of lives. She flinched at that. Good. She needed to. I stood and placed the final document on the table. The Educational Partnership Agreement. Starting this summer, the beach house will be used for marine biology workshops and conservation retreats. Granddad would have been proud. And no, there won't be room for family vacations anymore. Kyle pushed back from the table. You're insane, he muttered. Maybe, I said, but at least I'm done being your doormat. He looked like he wanted to explode, like he might knock over a glass again. But this time, there were too many witnesses, too many facts he couldn't bend. My dad finally spoke. Quietly. I warned you, Kyle. Kyle turned toward him. You're seriously siding with him? I'm siding with the truth. And then it happened. Kyle stormed out. No yelling. No final word. Just a rush of air, a slammed door, and the echo of someone who had finally realized the game was over. But for me, it was just beginning. Because what Kyle didn't know, not yet, was that his attempt at fraud had tripped an entirely different wire. One with financial consequences. And next week, the fallout from that wire would arrive. In the form of a subpoena. By the time the subpoena hit Kyle's mailbox, I had already distanced myself from the emotional fallout. That didn't mean I didn't feel it. I did. But it came in short, sharp stabs now, not the deep, aching kind that used to knock the wind out of me. He must have opened the envelope sometime in the early evening. I know this because I got a barrage of texts within the hour. The first few were furious, unhinged. What is this? Are you trying to ruin me? We're family, Nate. That last one almost made me laugh. Almost. But the most telling one came 20 minutes later. How much do you want to make this go away? There it was. Not a denial. Not a plea. A price. That's how Kyle always operated. If he couldn't guilt you, he'd buy his way out. Or at least try to. But this time, there wasn't an offer I'd accept. Because this time, I didn't want money. I wanted closure. Let me rewind, just for clarity. The subpoena wasn't for some courtroom soap opera. I wasn't dragging Kyle in front of a jury in a dramatic made-for-TV moment. That wasn't my style, and honestly, it wasn't necessary. What I did was more precise. I filed a civil complaint for attempted property fraud and identity misrepresentation, complete with supporting evidence from the real estate agent, the forged documents, and the camera footage. Margot, my lawyer, submitted everything with the county clerk's office, which triggered the subpoena and a formal court-ordered mediation hearing. Now here's the thing. I didn't need the court to award me anything. I already had the house, the trust, the zoning rights, and every legal document Kyle had no access to. But I wanted the record. I wanted a paper trail that would follow him, especially if he ever tried a similar stunt again with someone else. And more than anything, I wanted him to be confronted with the consequences of his actions in a way he couldn't spin with a half smile and a sob story. The hearing was scheduled 2 weeks out. That gave me time to prepare. Not just logistically, but mentally. I spent those 2 weeks clearing my head, running along the coast in the early mornings, sketching new designs for the nonprofit's summer renovation plans at the beach house, even attending a local architecture panel where, weirdly enough, someone approached me about a potential book deal. Nothing huge, just a collection of essays about sustainable design and legacy builds. I almost said no. Then I remembered Granddad, and how proud he would have been. I said yes. As for my family, well, that was a quieter storm. My mother left a voicemail the day after the subpoena was issued. Her tone was different this time. Quieter. Almost flat. Nate, I don't know what's happening anymore. I just want things to go back to normal. I didn't return the call. Because there was no normal to return to. Not when the normal was me being disposable. Convenient. The emotionally available son who asked for nothing and gave everything. The invisible sibling who always smoothed things over while Kyle played the martyr. Let that version of me stay buried. The morning of the hearing, I showed up in a charcoal gray blazer and jeans. Professional, but not trying to impress anyone. Kyle arrived with a different strategy. Full suit, polished shoes, hair slicked back. He looked like he was auditioning for a political campaign. Hannah was with him. She wore sunglasses indoors, like this was an episode of Real Housewives and not a county mediation hearing. Margot met me in the lobby. "You good?" she asked. I nodded. Better than ever. Inside, the conference room was neutral and beige, with a long oval table and 2 sets of chairs on either side. A court-appointed mediator sat at the head, a calm woman in her 50s with a clipboard and an expression that said she'd seen every kind of family implosion imaginable. The hearing began with standard procedures. Introductions, the reading of the complaint, confirmation of attendance. Then we got to the evidence. Margot laid it all out. Chronologically, factually, calmly. The forged documents. The real estate agent's testimony. The video of Kyle at the gate. The audio clip of his threats. The property zoning paperwork. The signed trust agreements, both of them. Kyle didn't say a word. Neither did Hannah. The longer Margot spoke, the more color drained from their faces. You could tell they hadn't expected this much preparation, this much proof. They thought I was bluffing, just like always. When it was Kyle's turn to respond, he cleared his throat and tried to sound composed. "This is all a misunderstanding," he began. "I was trying to protect a piece of family property. Nate's been unstable lately, and we were concerned that he might do something irrational." "Irrational, like calling the police?" the mediator asked without blinking. Kyle flinched. "I didn't mean." "I have a question," she said, turning to him directly. "Were you, at any point, granted legal authority to act on behalf of your brother regarding the property?" Kyle hesitated. "No, but I assumed. That's all I need. Thank you." The rest of the hearing was a formality. The mediator concluded that while no criminal charges were being pursued, the civil complaint would remain on record, and any future attempts to access or claim the property without legal documentation would be considered grounds for escalation, including a potential restraining order or fraud investigation. In short, he'd been warned. In writing. On record. For life. As we stood to leave, Kyle tried to make one last move. He leaned in, low enough that only I could hear. "You think this makes you better than me? You'll always be alone in that house. Just like you were always alone in this family." I smiled. Not cruelly. Just with quiet certainty. I'd rather be alone with integrity than surrounded by people who only show up when they want something. He blinked. Then I walked out. The fallout came quickly after that. Hannah started showing up to Sunday dinners without Kyle. Word had spread about the hearing, not just in the family, but in the community. People talk, especially in coastal towns. And when they found out he'd tried to forge documents to steal his own brother's house, the tide turned fast. He wasn't fired from his job. His father-in-law owned the company, but he lost several clients. One of them emailed me to say they were no longer comfortable working with someone who behaved so recklessly. As for Mom, she went quiet again. Not in the cold way. More like someone who'd been hit with a truth she couldn't unsee. 2 weeks after the hearing, she sent a box to my apartment. Inside was an old family photo album, one I hadn't seen in years. Tucked into the first page was a note. "I don't know if I ever saw you clearly, Nate. I'm sorry it took losing something for Kyle to see you. But I see you now. And I hope someday you'll let me make it right." I haven't responded yet. I don't know if I will. Some wounds heal, but the scar tissue never forgets. Still, I kept the album. That summer, the beach house came alive again. Not with family barbecues or forced holiday brunches, but with the sound of laughter from kids discovering tide pools, college students measuring erosion levels, volunteers planting dune grass. I partnered with a marine biology professor who brought his students for fieldwork. I gave a talk on coastal preservation. I even let them name the new workshop cabin they built behind the house, the Williams Retreat. They asked me to speak at the dedication. I kept it short. This place was built with love. It survived storms, selfishness, and silence. And now, it gets to give something back. I didn't mention Kyle. I didn't need to. Because the best revenge wasn't legal. It wasn't even personal. It was purpose. And I had finally found mine. As I stood on the porch that evening, watching the sunset bleed across the water, I realized something. They didn't take anything from me. They revealed me. And I was never going to shrink back again. Not for them. Not for anyone. My name is Caleb, and I'm 33 years old. I'm not someone who usually posts online about personal drama, especially not family drama, but I guess there's a first time for everything. You ever have a moment in life where someone pushes you so far past the line of reason, you just stop and think, okay, so this is really happening. That moment happened to me the day after my wedding. To backtrack just a bit, I come from a relatively small family. My dad passed away when I was in high school, and my mom followed a few years later. I was close to my grandfather on my dad's side. He was one of those gruff, no-nonsense types, the kind of guy who fixed his own roof at 75 and thought store-bought bread was a scam. We spent a lot of summers together at his oceanfront property, a modest little one-story place back then that he'd bought in the 70s before the neighborhood became what it is today. Over the years, he kept improving it. By the time he passed, the house was worth somewhere in the ballpark of $4 million. No mortgage, no debts, just the house, the view, and a small trust to keep the property taxes covered for a few decades. When he passed, he left the house to me. He didn't leave anything to my uncle or cousins, just me. He said, in his words, "You're the only one who actually gave a damn about me when I was alive." I didn't contest it, and no one else really made noise about it. Maybe they assumed I'd sell it. I didn't. I kept the house, renovated it tastefully with the money he left, and used it as my quiet place, away from everything. I never flaunted it. I barely even mentioned it. It felt like mine and his in a way. Sacred. Fast forward to last year, I met someone. Her name is Amanda. We hit it off fast. One of those whirlwind kind of relationships where 6 months in you already feel like you know everything about each other. She was funny, sharp, a little high maintenance, but in a way I found oddly charming at the time. Her family, on the other hand, that was a different story. I'll admit, I had some red flags waving in the back of my mind early on. Amanda's mother, Patricia, had this way of speaking like everything she said was a royal decree. When she first met me, she smiled, tilted her head, and said, "So you're the man with no parents. That must be hard." Just like that. No follow-up, no compassion. It wasn't even phrased like sympathy, more like an observation of status. Still, I brushed it off. First impressions aren't everything, I told myself. But Patricia didn't ease up. She commented on everything, from the car I drove, practical, but not very commanding, to the neighborhood I lived in. And yes, I didn't live at the beach house. I rented a place closer to the city for work. The oceanfront place was a bit of a sanctuary, and something I didn't want to expose to her judgmental gaze. I never told Amanda about it either. Not because I was hiding it, but because it didn't feel relevant. We both made decent money, and I figured one day, when the time was right, I'd take her there. But as things got serious and we started talking marriage, I felt a gnawing sense that her family's opinions were leaking into her perception of me. The constant little jabs, "You should dress more executive," or "Maybe Caleb should think about investing in property soon." Amanda laughed them off, but she never defended me either. That silence was loud. Still, love makes you compromise, right? Or maybe it makes you blind. Either way, I proposed, she said yes, and we got married in a small but elegant ceremony. Nothing too flashy, just our close friends, a few relatives, and, of course, her entire extended family who RSVP'd as if it were a royal gala. Patricia tried to change the venue twice, claimed the flowers weren't elevated enough, and even asked me a week before the wedding if I'd considered renting a tux that fit better across the shoulders. I kept the peace. I even paid for most of the wedding. Not because they couldn't afford it. They definitely could, but because I didn't want to feel indebted to Patricia. I didn't want to give her the leverage. Maybe, in some twisted way, I thought if I did enough to prove myself, she'd back off. She didn't. And now we come to the morning after the wedding. We were barely settled into our temporary apartment. The honeymoon was planned for the following week, when I heard a knock at the door. Amanda was still asleep. I answered in sweatpants and a t-shirt, bleary-eyed. Standing in the hallway, like they owned the building, were Patricia, her sister, Aunt Diane, and a man in a navy suit holding a leather briefcase. The moment I opened the door, Patricia walked past me like she lived there. "Good morning, Caleb," she said, as if we were old friends, and this wasn't wildly inappropriate. We thought it was time we had a little chat. You know, about the family assets. I was too stunned to speak. I shut the door behind them out of instinct. The man with the briefcase introduced himself as their family lawyer, a specialist in estate consolidation, whatever that meant. Patricia sat down on the couch, crossed her legs, and looked around the modest living room like she was slumming it. So, Amanda mentioned something about a property, something waterfront. My stomach dropped. I never told Amanda about the house in detail. I know that for sure. She knew my grandfather passed and that I'd inherited some property, but she never asked for details and I never offered. Maybe I should have. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered. I said cautiously yes. What about it? Patricia smiled like she was about to announce a promotion. Well, now that you and Amanda are married, we thought it would be appropriate to fold that asset into the family holdings. Amanda has always dreamed of opening a boutique bed and breakfast. You have a perfect location. We've drawn up some paperwork to get the title adjusted accordingly. The lawyer began to unzip his briefcase. I just stood there. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was confused. Disoriented, really. The kind of confusion where your brain stumbles over the words you're hearing because they don't make sense in any universe you know. I finally found my voice. The house is in a trust. My name. Only my name. And it's not for sale. Patricia didn't miss a beat. Of course, legally. But Caleb, we're family now. This house, this opportunity, it benefits us all. You don't want to deny your wife's family a chance to build something special, do you? I looked at the man with the briefcase. He was already pulling out a manila folder, sliding over a packet of papers that, from the brief glance I got, had phrases like transfer of deed and reassignment of title. I didn't touch them. Amanda walked out of the bedroom in a robe, eyes half closed. What's going on? She asked groggily. Her voice didn't carry concern, just curiosity. Patricia turned to her and said, Darling, we're sorting out the house plans. We'll need contractors by next month if we want a spring opening. That's when I realized something deep in my gut. This wasn't new to Amanda. She knew. She had to know. But she didn't look guilty. She didn't even look nervous. Just tired. Mom, she said, stretching. Can we talk about this later? Patricia frowned. Later? Amanda, this is time sensitive. You and Caleb need to be aligned. You can't build a life on secrets. I wasn't even looking at Patricia anymore. I was staring at my wife. My new wife. Wondering who, exactly, I had just promised forever to. That's when Amanda sighed and said, Look, Caleb, we're married now. It's just a house. If it helps everyone, what's the big deal? That sentence, that exact phrase, that's where something inside me finally clicked into place. And in that moment, everything changed. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just stared at her, trying to process the wave of emotions crashing all at once. Confusion, betrayal, disbelief. The room felt smaller, like the walls were pressing in. Amanda turned around and walked back into the bedroom like we were in the middle of a casual disagreement over groceries, not discussing the future of something that meant the world to me. Patricia clapped her hands softly, like she was finalizing a business merger. Wonderful. Let's just go ahead and sign the preliminary transfer forms so we can expedite the permits. She turned to the lawyer. He'll sign today. That was the moment I realized Patricia didn't see me as a person. I wasn't her son-in-law. I was an obstacle to be managed. A bridge to something she felt entitled to cross. I finally sat down, slowly, across from her. Calm. Still. I glanced down at the papers. Then I looked her in the eyes. I'm not signing anything. Her smile faltered. Excuse me. The house is not community property. It was placed in an irrevocable trust well before I met Amanda. It's protected from claims in the event of marriage, divorce, and yes, even family pressure. You're not getting it. The lawyer adjusted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. He said something about reviewing the trust if needed, but I barely heard him. Patricia's face hardened, and I saw something shift in her expression, something cruel beneath the surface. So that's your stance? You'd let your new family suffer just to cling to some house your dead grandfather left you. I stood up. I don't remember asking your opinion. And this conversation is over. She rose slowly, her tone icy. You have no idea who you're dealing with. You think you're the only man Amanda could have married? She chose you out of loyalty, out of love. But love fades when you start putting property over people. I didn't flinch. I think you should leave. She didn't move right away. Neither did the lawyer. It took a few more seconds, tense, heavy seconds, before she gathered her things. As she walked past, she muttered, You'll regret this. When the door closed behind them, I stood there in silence. Amanda came back out minutes later, fully dressed. She didn't say anything, just sat at the dining table, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. "Did you know she was planning that?" I asked. She didn't look up. "She mentioned the idea a while back." "That's not what I asked." She finally glanced at me. "Okay, yes. She wanted to see if we could make it a family business. I thought if she talked to you herself, you'd be more open to it. And you didn't think to talk to me about it first?" "Before inviting a lawyer into my apartment the day after our wedding." "I didn't invite them. She just does things." I nodded. Her tone wasn't defensive, just tired. But what struck me wasn't what she said, it was what she didn't say. She didn't apologize. She didn't say she disagreed with her mom. She didn't say she was on my side. I sat back down, staring at her. "You do realize that house isn't going anywhere," I said slowly. "It's not getting transferred. It's not going to be turned into a business. It's staying exactly as it is." Amanda exhaled, as if I was being unreasonable. "Caleb, this doesn't have to be a whole thing. If you're really that attached to it, maybe we can compromise. Let her manage it for a while. Just temporarily." I almost laughed. Temporarily. That word hit me harder than it should have. As if you can temporarily hand over a piece of your family legacy to someone who sees you as a footnote in their daughter's resume. At that moment, I knew we had a bigger problem than her mother. The rest of that day passed like a haze. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't storm out. I didn't even argue. I just watched her, the woman I had married 24 hours ago, act like my boundaries were inconveniences. And I kept thinking back to my grandfather, how he warned me before he passed. "Be careful, Caleb. People smile with their teeth when there's a house near water." I didn't sleep that night. Amanda did. By morning, I had a plan. Not out of spite. Out of self-preservation. I wasn't going to let this spiral. I wasn't going to be another story where the entitled in-laws carved out pieces of someone's life while smiling sweetly through dinner. I wasn't going to wake up one day to find the locks changed on my own property. So while Amanda was in the shower, I made a few quiet calls. To the trust attorney, to the security company that managed the beach house, and to someone else, someone I hadn't spoken to in a while, but who owed me a favor. The kind of favor you only call in when things have crossed a line. Then I went for a drive. Out to the coast. Out to the house. When I arrived, the view looked the same as always. But it felt different, like I was seeing it through new eyes. I walked the perimeter, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. It smelled like salt and old wood and peace. I stood in the living room for a long time, not moving. And that's when I made my decision. They weren't just not getting the house. They were never going to step foot inside it again. But I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to dismantle their plan piece by piece, with every ounce of calm, calculated silence I had left. And by the time they realized what I had done, it would be far, far too late. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I stayed at the beach house. I turned off my phone. I needed time. I needed to be in a place where my thoughts were my own. No buzzing, no guilt tripping, no fake apologies or explanations wrapped in honeyed tones. Just the ocean, the quiet, and me. I stood out on the deck with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, watching the waves slam into the shore like they had something to say. My grandfather always said the sea had a memory, that it remembered who belonged. That night, I think it remembered me. The next morning, I drove into town and met with Michael Tran, the attorney who'd helped draft my grandfather's trust years ago. Sharp guy. He wore plain clothes and had a voice that didn't waste time. I explained what happened, about the uninvited visit, the lawyer, the family business, and Amanda's reaction. He listened without interruption, only raising an eyebrow once when I mentioned the paperwork they'd tried to slip in. After I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "You're safe legally. The house is protected under the trust, and since it was placed prior to the marriage, it's not considered marital property. Not unless you intentionally commingle it." "I haven't," I said firmly. "Good. But you're in a vulnerable position socially. If your wife and her family push hard enough, they could make your life miserable, even if they can't touch the house. You need to think long-term." I nodded slowly. "That's why I'm here." And so we started planning. The first step? Ironclad boundaries. I had Michael amend the trust with an addendum, something my grandfather had included as a suggestion but never filed. It stated that only direct blood descendants of the trust creator had access to the property, and that any third-party use of the home, whether personal or commercial, would trigger a clause locking down access for a minimum of 15 years. Extreme? Maybe, but necessary. Patricia and Amanda had already shown they weren't going to respect polite refusal. The second step? Security. I called up Leo, a longtime friend from college who now ran a boutique private security firm. He specialized in wealthy clients with privacy concerns. A few favors and a hefty invoice later, the beach house was scheduled for a full overhaul, discreet surveillance, electronic gate, biometric locks. The works. Leo didn't ask many questions. Just said, "You expecting trouble?" "Not yet," I replied. "But I like to be early." He nodded. "We'll make sure nobody steps foot on that sand without your say-so." The third step? Paperwork. So much paperwork. I filed for a temporary separation. Not a divorce. Not yet. I didn't want Amanda or Patricia to catch wind of what I was doing. Not until I was ready. But the separation gave me room to move, to breathe, and to legally redirect my assets back into a separate account that only I controlled. No shared credit lines. No joint investments. Every dollar that had my name on it got quietly walked back into my corner. Then I packed up my things from the apartment when Amanda wasn't home. I didn't leave a note. I didn't return her texts. Not yet. Because silence, I was learning, is its own kind of power. 2 days passed before I finally got a knock on the door of the beach house. I didn't answer. I watched from the window as Amanda stood at the gate, squinting at the camera. She had a shopping bag in one hand and a frustrated look on her face. The gate didn't open. She knocked again, then rang the new intercom. "Caleb," she said, her voice echoing through the system. "This is ridiculous. Just let me in. We need to talk." I leaned against the wall and stayed quiet. A few seconds passed. She crossed her arms. "I know you're in there. You can't just ghost me like this. What are you even trying to prove?" Her voice wasn't angry. Not yet. Just annoyed. Like I was the unreasonable one. Then she tried again. "Look, I didn't mean to blindside you. I thought if Mom talked to you, you'd be more open-minded. She's just trying to help." I clenched my jaw. The word help tasted like vinegar. Amanda stood there for a few more minutes, then pulled out her phone. She paced a little. Tried calling. I watched it buzz on my coffee table and didn't move. She finally gave up and walked away, muttering something I couldn't hear. I didn't sleep that night either, but not from anxiety. This time, it was clarity. The kind of clarity that comes from seeing people for who they really are when they think they already own you. The next day, Patricia called. Blocked. Then Diane. Blocked. Then Amanda again, several times. She left one voicemail where her tone finally cracked. She wasn't calm anymore. "Caleb, this isn't a good look for you. You're acting paranoid. It's just a house. Why are you blowing up our whole marriage over a stupid house?" She didn't get it. It was never about the house. It was about control. It was about trust. It was about the fact that the moment things didn't align with their vision, they tried to muscle me into submission, with papers, with lawyers, with guilt. But I wasn't going to break. A few days later, I finally agreed to meet Amanda for coffee in a public place. Neutral ground. No lawyers. No family. Just us. When I walked into the cafe, she was already seated, sipping something with oat milk and tapping her phone. She looked up and gave me a smile that I might have once found comforting. Now it felt rehearsed. "I was starting to think you'd never show," she said. "I almost didn't," I replied, sliding into the seat across from her. She wasted no time. "Look, I know things got out of hand, but we're married. We need to figure this out like adults. That house, it's not worth blowing everything up over." There it was again. That house. I took a deep breath. "Amanda, do you even realize what you did? You sent your mother and a lawyer to my door the day after our wedding to take something that's been in my family for generations. Without asking. Without even talking to me first. She was just trying to help me get started with something real. And I was supposed to what? Sign it over like a birthday gift?" She said nothing. Her jaw tightened slightly. I continued. "I've taken steps. The house is locked down permanently. The trust has new terms. Legally speaking, no one but me can use it for any reason, personal or commercial. You won't ever see the inside of that house again." Her eyes narrowed. "So that's it. You're punishing me because my mom had a bad idea?" I laughed once. "Amanda, it wasn't just her idea. You let it happen. And the worst part? You didn't even think you did anything wrong." She looked at me with a mix of frustration and disbelief, as if she couldn't understand how I'd gotten this far without seeing her side. Then her voice dropped. Low. Bitter. You know what? I could have done better. That hurt more than it should have. But I nodded. You still can. Then I stood up. Her voice followed me as I walked out. You think you're untouchable because of that trust? You think this ends here? I didn't turn around. Because it didn't end there. It hadn't even begun. 3 weeks passed. In that time, Amanda tried every angle she could think of. First came the love-bombing texts, old photos of us, inside jokes, long messages about how we could rebuild, as if all of this had been a minor misunderstanding and not a coordinated grab at my family's legacy. When those didn't work, she pivoted to guilt. She sent voice notes in the middle of the night about how I was abandoning her, about how marriage means sacrifice, and how she felt blindsided that I wouldn't even try to fix things. I didn't reply. She wasn't sorry for what happened. She was sorry I didn't roll over. Then came the escalation. One morning, I received a formal notice requesting mediation. Amanda had filed for access to marital assets, arguing that the beach house, despite being protected, was part of our shared lifestyle and should at least be partially monetized during our separation. I smiled when I opened the envelope. She had no idea what she had walked into. Because while Amanda and Patricia had been scheming for weeks, I had gone silent on purpose. And in that silence, I'd been documenting everything. I compiled every text, every voicemail, every time she admitted to knowing her mother had a plan. The security system at the beach house? It had logged her unsuccessful attempts to access the property 3 different times, twice using her sister's car, once on foot. She'd even tried to get in with a fake contractor ID. All of it, I forwarded to my lawyer. And then, quietly, I filed. Not just for divorce, but for damages. See, the trust included a clause, one my grandfather added after a previous ugly family fight decades ago, that stated any attempt to seize, profit from, or misrepresent ownership of the estate would trigger a financial penalty. The trust would move the equivalent of 10% of its assets into a private legal defense fund, and the offender would be liable for those costs, regardless of outcome. Amanda's request to monetize the house. It triggered that clause. The letter she got 2 days later was short, formal, and devastating. It stated that not only would she be receiving nothing from the trust, but that she now owed $183,000 in penalties, legal fees, and damages for breach of marital contract and attempted property misappropriation. She called me. I didn't answer. Patricia emailed me through her assistant, demanding that I reconsider and act like a man. I forwarded it directly to my lawyer. They tried a new tactic after that, public shame. Amanda posted cryptic messages online, quotes about betrayal, secrets in marriage, and even hinted that I had hidden assets from her for years. But she underestimated one thing. Her own friends didn't buy it. One of them even messaged me privately. She really thought she could just take your house? She told us you were stupid for not putting it in both names. That message? Screenshot. Archived. Meanwhile, I focused on the life I actually wanted. I moved into the beach house full-time. I canceled all the wedding photos, returned every gift, and sent refunds to every guest who had contributed to the registry. I wrote a short note explaining why. I kept it civil, honest, and dignified. No drama, just the truth. Amanda was furious. She texted me, "You're ruining my reputation." I didn't reply, because I wasn't ruining anything. I was revealing it. Eventually, she backed down. The legal pressure, the mounting costs, and the weight of a narrative she couldn't control finally wore her down. She withdrew her request. We signed the divorce papers. No spousal support. No settlement. No apology. Just silence. Patricia never contacted me again. 6 months later, I hosted a small gathering at the beach house. Just a few friends, some quiet music, a little fire pit out by the water. No drama. No lawyers. No shadows. I stood on the porch that evening, drink in hand, watching the tide roll in just like it always had. I thought of my grandfather. I thought of what he protected and how I'd nearly let someone take it from me in the name of love. But love, real love, doesn't come with ultimatums or contracts or ambushes in your living room the morning after your wedding. It comes with honesty, with respect, with choosing someone because of who they are, not in spite of what they own. I still believe in that kind of love, but now I know the difference. And the next time I meet someone, I'll tell them about the house on day one, not to impress them, but to see if they care too much. Because the ones who don't, they're the ones who belong. And this time, I'll make sure the gate stays closed until I'm absolutely sure who's on the other side.